Alright, hello and welcome to another episode of Diplo Strats. Today we're going to be looking at Imperial Diplomacy. Now this variant has captured our hearts and minds over on the Diplo Strats channel. We've made to date 10 videos about it. There's another video in the editing room at the moment, and then another game that's going to result in more videos after that. So it's clearly been a variant that's impacted us a lot. It's definitely been one that the viewers have absolutely loved. And actually we've done 14 videos. Sorry, I tell a lie because there were 4 on the spin-off that only affected Europe. But to date, we've only actually played on 2 versions of the map. And there have been more than 2 versions of the map. There has been a third one that came out after all the videos that we've made. And now there's actually a 4th version that also came out. So I thought it would be pretty cool if we did a quick video. I say quick by Diplo Strat standards, probably just as long as all the rest of the videos, looking at how this map has evolved through the ages, through its iterations. And who better to get on for that than one of the creators and the map designer of Imperial Diplomacy himself, Flare. Hello and welcome, Flare.
I am Flare. I'm honored to be here on the channel. It's gonna be really cool to just talk about my map and talk to Meme because we have gotten to know each other since you played the first game of Imperial Diplomacy, of course, and it's been a lot of fun so far.
Yeah, I mean, it's fantastic to have you on the channel finally. As mentioned, we've spoken a lot over the last year, and I think it was almost exactly a year ago that I first started playing this variant.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's true. I think the game that we played together started the 4th of March last year, so it's very close.
Yep, and as I'm speaking, the 4th version of Imperial Diplomacy was announced today. Not today,
Yes,
yesterday.
exactly. Yeah, we released the final map for the new version just a few hours ago, so
Okay,
it's very
perfect.
cool.
Right. So, as I'm talking about that, we have 4 different versions of this map. At the moment, the one I've got up is the very first version, which has my power that I played over here in Bornu, and of course, Flare played as Poland, and Poland is a bit
Yeah.
bigger than St. Andrew Island, but as far as I was concerned in the game, I think I only interacted with you here.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that was a very fun game.
It was awesome. But yeah, as we'll see as we go through, Bornu doesn't survive very much longer than this.
Yeah, Bornu still has a journey throughout the history of Imperial Diplomacy, though.
Indeed it does, and we'll get to that when we look at Africa, but I think we're going to start with Europe, because, as you've mentioned to me, Europe doesn't actually undergo that many changes through this, but it does undergo some important ones, right?
Yes, it surely does. Europe is, of course, the core of the map. Some of the most important powers on the map are the colonials itself, being England, Netherlands, France, Spain, Portugal, and kind of Poland, Lithuania.
Yeah.
And since they all have their capitals in Europe, and you're required to hold your capital to win the game, Europe is very important for this variant.
Yes. And I think that's something that Ezio and I have talked about a lot, right? Especially with regard to Netherlands, who, the poor Netherlands, only start with 2 units in here. I mean, I guess it's the same for Portugal, but Portugal are a little more on the edge of things, so maybe defensible. Whereas,
Yeah, and they also have Azores just off the coast, so
yes, that is true. So I guess they're on 3, but Netherlands having to hold their capital just seems absolutely insane. But that said,
yeah.
we've actually seen some really good Netherlands results over the course of the Imperial Diplomacy games, right?
Yeah, there's been Netherlands solo and 2 other Netherlands wins, I think,
Yeah.
across like 20 games, so that's pretty good.
Yeah. So I think everyone would agree that it's a hard power to play, but it's a power that can do incredibly well. Not that you'd think it from just looking at their European start.
Yeah, for sure.
Uh, Alright, so we are currently looking at the Alpha 1 version of the map here. I do have the Alpha 2 version ready to go, but before we start on that, like, was there anything in your mind when you were first creating this area, or anything that particularly stood out to you as something that you wanted to see in this region, to like something that was your focus while you were designing it?
So I guess one thing we can discuss is why are these the powers I selected? Because there was a lot of other countries in Europe that I could have selected. There's been suggestions of adding, for example, the Holy Roman Empire or Brandenburg, Prussia.
Yes, I think
And
King of Prussia would have been very much pushing for that, right?
yeah, he has suggested it many times. So basically, the reason why we ended up here to start with is that okay, so all the colonials were of course guaranteed, and I really wanted Sweden on the map because I'm Swedish, and this is during the time where Sweden were pretty proper empire, so it's very cool to capture their glory days.
Yes.
Um, but um, when we created the map, we were thinking about, okay, we have these four options pretty much for Central Europe, being Poland, Austria, Holy Roman Empire, and uh, Russia. Um, and we decided to do Poland and Austria because Holy Roman Empire was just not working, I think, because Netherlands really needs some space since they only have two centers.
Yeah.
And Russia just didn't work out with Poland. And Poland was just a bit more interesting as um, it had the potential of colonies, which is very nice.
Yes. So we will look at the Polish colonies later during this thing. I think it does make sense to not have the Holy Roman Empire. Also, just historically, right, it would have been a lot more fragmented at
Yeah,
this time than any of the other powers we see
exactly.
on the board.
Yep.
Obviously, there's more of a reason for Prussia, because they, I think, were a consolidated power at this point. But
Yeah, at least they're really starting to become consolidated by this point. Um, I think in the start of the 1700s, they really become powerful. So we're close to the time of big strong Prussia.
yes, but not in Imperial Diplomacy because they do not exist.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, and also, given what we've seen over the course of a few iterations, which I'm sure we'll go over here with Austria, and just it feels like Austria would have been one of the toughest powers for you to plan for, right? Just being in the middle of a lot of colonials,
Yeah.
and still having to control all this space that a lot of strong powers will not want them to control.
Yeah, Austria will be a very interesting power um, to build, and I've struggled a lot with like how do I want to figure out how to make this power work, and we're starting to approach an Austria that I think actually worked pretty well. Uh, but as you said, Austria has the problems of being very close to a lot of very strong powers, and it's being in the center, and it doesn't have a lot of centers itself. Um, and it just needs to occupy most of Europe to actually win, which is very hard. So yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Alright, well, let's go ahead and look at the Alpha 2 version of the map then, see what changes as we go from A1 to A2. So I don't immediately see what did change there. I hope that you have some memory of what does. I know that a lot
Yeah,
of like place names will change, and that's mainly as a result of people suggesting it on your Discord, right?
yep, exactly.
Yeah. So
So the main changes for Europe here is to start with Sweden. Sweden performed quite badly during the first alpha, and we realized that it wasn't possible to have them as a 5-center power because depending on how many centers you start with, you have a different win condition, and Sweden having that high of win condition just didn't work out for them. So we decided to remove their starting center in Narva and just make it a pre-cord center instead. We also made Skagerrak adjacent to Wadden Sea, which means Sweden just more quickly could get into Netherlands and such to expand over there, because they were a bit isolated up in Scandinavia.
Yep. Let me just... So here was the original version. You can see Skagerrak disconnected from Wadden and having to go through North Sea or Jutland to get there. And of course, that's starting army in Narva. Here on A2, we do not have the starting army in Narva anymore. Did I see Gulf of Riga change as well?
Yeah. I had forgotten about Gulf of Finland actually existing. But yeah, Poland and Sweden were in Alpha 1 very natural allies, and I wanted to spark a bit extra tension between the two, while adding more like potential speed in Sweden. So we merged Gulf of Finland and Gulf of Riga to make Helsingfors and Vilno much closer to each other.
Yes, and I think with Narva being taken out as a supply center, that makes even more sense, right? Because these two powers will be hopefully opposing each other over that area. I know Helsingfors also changes from a fleet to an army.
So that was partly due to because we wanted one of Sweden's units to be a natural unit to maybe go against Russia year 1, and Narva not being there anymore mean they didn't have any east-facing armies, so it was turned into an army so they could walk into Kola or Karelia or something.
Gotcha. Yeah, it makes sense. And I suppose with this unit being an army as well, if they had a fleet here, that would be really painful for Poland year 1, right? If they just decide to go south.
Yeah, exactly. So that whole area was designed to make it so that there is possible fighting for Sweden and Poland, while not making year 1 overly tense for either of them.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Alright, well, is there anything else you want to talk about with regard to Sweden? Or shall we move to the rest of Europe?
I think we can move on.
Okay, so elsewhere in Europe, I did notice this. I think this changes from...
Yes, that's a huge change, because previously movement between the Ottoman Empire and Austria were really difficult. But with the split of Croatia, we actually saw some more Ottoman-Austria wars, which was a good change.
Yes. I think this is just something in general. If you have problems with stalemate lines or anything similar, people finding it really hard to push through, it's usually because a territory is too large, right?
Exactly. When an area is too difficult to traverse, there just needs to be a bit more tiles there, so that we have more to work with.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And here now they can go in via 2 different directions, which is perfect.
Yep. Additionally, within the Ottoman borders, the tile Albania was replaced with Macedonia. If you go back to the A1 map, yeah. And that was a very minor change, but I think that whole area is not perfect for A2, I think, because the Athens army is very useless.
Yeah, year 1, I don't see what it reaches, right? It's not got a target dot, so it kind of just spends the first year coming up north to try and get to Banat or Slavonia or something.
Yeah, pretty much.
But yeah.
And that was not very fun. We'll fix that later.
Alright, so what else changes here? I don't...
Switzerland.
Okay.
So France and Austria had this issue where they were fighting a lot. And it was too much for Austria. Mm-hmm. So we split Switzerland to relieve them both a bit of tension, which made it so that Austria could focus on Poland and Ottomans much earlier.
Yeah, that makes sense. When you have, like, this kind of... I mean, the Holy Roman Empire area in particular is very SC rich, right? There's a lot that people want to go for here. And if you have these two powers that close to each other to start, I think it is very natural for a war to start here. Whereas I think what we've been seeing in more recent iterations of the variant is more Austrias and Frances actually just negotiating which dots to take and then dealing with problems elsewhere, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that's worked very well.
Other than that, I think there was a small change in Mediterranean, splitting the Tyrrhenian Sea into two tiles, Tyrrhenian Sea and Cherky Banks. And some minor changes to how Levantine Sea was set up, which made the Smyrna fleet able to get out a bit quicker.
Right. So the Aegean sort of... I almost liken it, the new version, to standard diplomacy, right? You've got the Ionian Sea here, and then Eastern Med here, and then
it was very much inspired by Classic.
Yes. And in the original, it stretches all the way to Syria, which, of course, I guess, as you were mentioning, means that Smyrna has very few options. Here, it's much better off. All right.
Yeah, as the variant gets older, my goal has been to increase the number of options that each unit has the first year, because the more possible openings there are, the more dynamic the first years of the variant is, and dynamics are fun.
Yeah, I mean, I agree completely. I feel like...
Go on.
Sorry. I feel like I've mostly been playing Colonials since that first Bornu game, right? And Colonials seem to always have quite a lot of options just because how incredibly spread out they are across the board.
Yeah.
So I maybe haven't experienced that as much as, or the change in that, as much as people playing some of the other powers will have. But I'm pretty sure, especially, like... in certain regions, options have definitely gotten a bit better over time.
Yep, for sure.
Alright.
I think we've mostly covered Europe between Alpha 1 and Alpha 2.
Perfect. Right, well then we'll move on to... So, as we go on from Alpha here, the game went into beta with the release of, like, monthly waves, right? Am I correct on that?
Yep, we got a lot bigger player base, and we needed to be able to give everyone fun games to play.
I do remember that, like, the influx was kind of insane after the first wave.
Yeah, for those who don't know, after the first diplomacy video that Meme uploaded about Imperial Diplomacy, our server went from 140 members to 800 in just a week. Which
I do remember, like, waking up and seeing just the list of new joiners on that page.
Yeah, same.
Same. Insane.
I woke up, like, I saw 50 plus new messages in public Square channel, and most of them were just joins, and every minute someone new joined, and it was just like, what is going on? And then I checked the YouTube and saw the video.
I think, like, just the variant itself really strikes a chord with people, especially considering I think a lot of our viewers on Diplostrats are map starers from Paradox games, right? So things like
makes sense.
Europa Universalis and Crusader Kings, just... And this kind of worldwide map, and especially the fact that it's pretty true to the original Diplomacy, right? There's very few extra rules. It's just translating the experience from original Diplomacy onto a massive multiplayer game, right?
Yeah.
And it just works really, really well, and it appeals to a hell of a lot of people. And so now I think Imperial Diplomacy is like almost the biggest Discord server of any diplomacy thing. It's maybe
I
100
I believe it is.
members behind Nexus at this point, but Nexus has been going for a decade, so.
Actually, one thing I noticed this morning is that ImpDip this morning had 1,642 members. You know why that's special?
Oh, because it's the starting year of the variant. That's
Yeah.
that's very cool. All right,
Yeah.
no one else is allowed to join the ImpDiff server. We're at the perfect number.
Exactly.
All right, but seriously, if you do want to join the ImpDip server, it is in the description below, and you are welcome to join, despite you ruining the 1642 number.
Yeah, exactly. We'd love to have you.
All right. So going from Alpha 2 here, as you mentioned, as we go onto the beta version of the map, the move from Alpha to Beta was to do with how often waves were launched. So there weren't actually any map changes between Alpha 2 and Beta 1. But then we had Beta 1-2, which it was the second wave of games for the beta mode. And that one did have some pretty substantial changes, right?
Yes, exactly, because Europe was actually one of the two regions I focused for this patch. So Europe has a lot of very relevant changes.
Alright, well, let's take a look at what those changes are. So you can see just by like flicking between the two of them that some substantial stuff changed here. Is there anything you want to look at specifically?
I think we look at Austria.
Okay.
Because Austria's position changed a lot. So we moved one of its starting supply centers from Prague in the north to Pressburg, which all of a sudden placed Austria in this super tense position with both the Ottoman Empire and Poland. And we also added the little center in the split, which further just connected them to the Ottoman Empire. So
right, the little
Austria,
center, yeah, down here.
yeah. So this we also moved some dots over in Italy and such, and this was really an attempt to make Austria very fast power, because they really struggled if they went slow. So I just thought, okay, let's just put them very, very close to everyone and see what the players can do with this crazy power now. And so far, people seem to doing quite well with Austria, very well. So that's very cool.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good approach to this. So I'm not a variant designer. All of my opinions in this will probably be wrong, but I will say what what my general thoughts on them are. But in this kind of situation, right, Austria's main problem is that it's in a continent that is surrounded by powers who will become massively powerful in other regions and will be able to use that power to funnel more units into their home base, which they have to control, right? They have to keep control of that capital, because otherwise all their gains everywhere else are useless. They can't win the game. So
Yep, exactly.
making it fast in the way you did, right, means that Austria has the chance to negate some of that power before those countries are able to start funneling their foreign units into Europe. Before they can stabilize in, like, North America, for example, with France. If they take over this area, they can just use those dots to put armies down over here. If Austria is moving very, very quickly, I mean, towards France, maybe that's less of a thing, because France is a little further away, but it gives them the opportunity to prevent that before it can happen, right?
Yep, exactly. That was pretty much exactly the motivation behind this set of changes.
Okay, perfect.
We just really wanted Austria to be a risky power to play, but if you manage to get your alliances under control, you manage to place very carefully placed stabs and just really play tempo, you could really get control over Europe before the colonials have a chance to establish themselves properly.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, yeah. So, were there any other changes with regard to that, or was that the majority of them? I guess the Italy ones you mentioned probably impact that as well, right? It's adding
So
the
there,
dot here instead of
yeah,
here.
exactly. There was a dot in Genoa before, but we moved it to be adjacent to Venice, so that um, Austria had increased playmaking potential on it early on, instead of it being a kind of isolated center.
Yeah.
Um, so to compensate for the fact that Austria might have gotten weaker by getting closer to other powers, I had to do some compensation to France. And as you can see, France went from 5 to 4 centers in the region, which
Yeah.
is pretty huge.
I do remember this one. I remember this generating a lot of conversation in the Discord, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's not perfectly balanced right now. France is a bit underpowered, and Austria a bit too strong. But my hope is that I'll be able to fix it in the coming patch, to give France some power again.
Gotcha. That's the benefit
Yeah,
of like doing this iterative design, right? Because every time you
exactly.
release the new map, then a bunch of people play on it, and then you get to see how that kind of power level translates across the games that you're running. um,
Yep, exactly. And that's why these beta periods should work really well for the development of the map. Just seeing what people do with the changes and so on in real time, and then doing some small changes, just like having a lot of data to play around with.
yeah. All right. Yeah. So we haven't talked specifics on the French changes. So you reduced their army count by one. I guess it was kind of the Bordeaux unit that came off, and Paris got made a little
Yep.
bigger here. In fact, all the
Yeah.
provinces around here got made quite
Mm,
large, right?
yeah, and all their centers are adjacent to Aquitaine,
Yes. So, what
which
was the
is
logic behind that one?
so people have for a long time said that the border between Spain and France is just too defensible and a bit uninteresting. And in general, France has been better at attacking Spain than the reverse. So I thought it would be very interesting to add this very powerful move from Spain into the French homeland by just building Army Barcelona and going in. Uh, so it's really just to make the relationship between the colonials even harder to keep, because colonial alliances running the games are rarely fun, I think.
Yeah.
So adding a lot of conflict for the colonials is good, I think.
Yeah, and of course, like, that's a really tough thing to balance because colonials are always quite incentivized to work with each other just because there'll probably be
Yeah,
one region on the map somewhere where they have incentive to work together, and that kind of forces them to work together in other regions as well just to appease each other, right?
yeah, exactly.
So
So
adding
it's
conflict
it's
points is definitely a good idea. Yeah.
so it might have been a bit too overkill because France was one of the strongest powers during A2, the map that you guys have played over here on the Plus Strats.
Yeah.
Um, but we'll fix it.
All right.
It'll be fine.
So, were there any other changes in Europe that you want to go over between A2 and B12 here? I
Sweden,
guess.
again. So Sweden is like a regular problem for us. They're one of the weaker powers. They've still not won a single game, and it's really because they're so isolated up in the north, and they can't play quickly.
Mhm.
And you recognize that problem? Austria got it too. So I'm just slowly attempting to make Sweden a bit quicker. So as you could see, we actually removed a center in Norway,
Oh, the
so
Bergen
that
one.
so that Sweden can more quickly um, get around the Norwegian peninsula or whatever, so they can get up into Spitsbergen and so on, and England much quicker.
Gotcha.
So they lost a dot, but it has allowed them to play quicker. It allowed them to get into key positions much quicker.
Hmm.
So it's not always about giving us power centers. Sometimes it's better to give them important positions or possibilities to play for certain battles.
Yeah, I do think as Sweden, my focus would still be here just because of the number of dots in
Mm.
this area, right? um,
Yep.
that's pretty substantial, but the fact that they can escape that much more easily must like make that a better run for them. Although I think
Mm.
Russia is likely to get Spits first, right?
They are.
Yeah.
So pretty much that change is made to make it so that Poland-Swedish alliances um, give Sweden a bit more tempo
Mhm.
uh, by allowing them to actually snatch the northern seas from Russia much quicker.
Got it. Yeah. Have
Which, go on.
Sorry, I was gonna say, have you seen much of a problem with England-Swedish relations since this, though? Because I do remember that
Uh,
Bergen used to be like a centre England would pretty regularly go for.
so that was something many were worried of, but I think it has actually improved the map drastically because England just doesn't take it anymore, but much rather interact with France and the Netherlands by, for example, bouncing in the English Channel or something like that. And it just gives England more tools to attack the other colonials early on.
Gotcha. Yeah, it makes sense. And I guess this Gothenburg fleet, now that I'm looking at it, is just moving into Christiania on the first turn, so
Exactly.
England can't go for it anyway. Um,
Yep.
They'll always be bounced out. Alright,
Yeah.
nice. So is there anything else you want to talk about here?
Um. Hmm. There. We so Poland. Uh, Poland here got a small change in that they now have Kiev adjacent to Kharkiv, uh,
Oh,
which
right.
is which is huge, because they're a lot closer to the Ottoman Empire due to that. And this change is was motivated by the whole Austria change as well, because I wanted to make sure that Ottomans and Poland still had enough tension to make sure that they wouldn't just run over this now very um, vulnerable Austria.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So adding tension to powers is in general a super useful tool when designing variants, because often you want certain powers to have more tension than others, and just making them closer in multiple points uh, gives you a lot of over how the dynamics of the game might play out.
Yes. I do notice we still don't actually have anything like at least in this area, we don't have anything like the Italy-Austria connections in standard diplomacy, right? Where you start with two powers
Yeah.
directly next to each other. Was that something you generally wanted to avoid?
In general, yes. I I haven't really tried it out ever. Uh, I think there's a place for it in variants, but I think it's hard to do it right, and I don't want to risk it for different reasons.
That's very
Uh,
fair.
but I do absolutely think there's a place for it. Um, but I don't know if I could execute it.
Mhm. Gotcha. So yeah, when I'm looking at this area now, it kind of looks like the most natural opening for these two is both to bounce in Ochakiv and then go for the guaranteed center in the following turn, except it's not actually guaranteed, right? Because Austria could walk in and annoy one of them. And of course you've got the Russian unit coming down to Bakches.
Exactly. And do you take Targoviste with Sarajevo then? And so you just leave Split open?
That's a very good point too. There's as you were mentioning earlier, this is all about options for the units, right?
Exactly. Yeah,
Alright.
in general, I think this patch for Europe really improved the dynamics, the early dynamics of the game, which is fun.
Nice. Alright. And then of course we have, well, was there any other change you want to talk about on
So there's been a Russian pre-core that has been bouncing around between Bakhchisaray and Chache. I'm trying to make it so that Russia can get fleets into Black Sea, but it was never really successful. Because it was just way too close to our centers to be open for a fleet build in winter.
Yeah, as someone currently playing Russia on the A2 map, so on this one, I can confirm I have not been able to build any fleets in Chache.
Yeah, Chache is a really hard center to defend due to Derbent and Sibili.
Yes. This area I really love, like, just the fact that all three of these powers are immediately, like, in this kind of, what would you call it, like, cowboy standoff? Like, the good, the bad, and the ugly, the three people.
It's one of my favorite dynamics across the entire map.
Does it stay the same through all the iterations? I haven't looked at...
No, it actually changes for the last version.
Oh, okay.
Slightly.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's in the area that we were looking at for Europe, but we can cover it in the last version.
I think it's part of Europe.
All right. Kinda. Shall we move to that one then and have a look?
Yeah, sure.
All right. Well, here's the change.
So the main change here is Russia. Because if we zoom out a bit, Russia has gotten majorly reworked. They went from a 10 center power to 8 center power in this patch, and I'll talk a bit more about it maybe when we get to Asia. But the general goal here was to make them a more Europe-focused power. And the three most important changes here was to begin with this Caucasus area. Russia can now put 2 units into this area early on if they want to, which is interesting. But of course, Bakhchisaray is still there, and you probably want to take it. So it's a bit of a trade-off. But I don't know. It should be interesting, I hope.
I find the way that this is set up to be quite interesting too, with regards to putting 2 on this area, right? Because one of the changes here with I'm going to pronounce all these terribly. I'm sorry, Shapsug. You can put 2 onto Blissey, or you can put 2 on Durban.
Exactly.
You get that choice in the first turn. I feel like I would naturally go this way if I wanted to put 2 in this area, just because it looks like this is Russian already. So when I was looking at the openings there, I was like, oh yeah, this is naturally how I do it. But actually, this seems just as effective.
Especially since Kharkov, which is a new center, now borders Sea of Azov.
Oh, nice.
You can build fleets without that pre-core.
Okay.
To attack the Ottoman Empire.
Man, that's actually a huge change, right? I didn't notice that bit there.
It's one of the biggest changes in Europe, period, I think. So it'll be very interesting to see how this entire area gets affected by that. We might host a Blitz game again next weekend with this map, just to kick off the entire wave. So we might get to see it very soon, actually.
Oh, that will be very, very hype. I always love the Blitz games. They're fantastic. All right. Was there anything else major that changed in Europe between?
Yes. So just below Narva, up in Sweden, I actually added a center in what was previously Livonia, and now Riga, and making sure that both Poland and Russia had a starting unit on it.
Ooh,
Um, so they're quite likely to bounce year one, and then Sweden has the potential to choose who gets it.
got it. So it's a very similar situation to Orchakiev then, with
Yeah.
these two bouncing and then Russia comes in to help. Here it's these two bouncing and then Sweden coming in to help.
Mm-mm.
Super interesting. I feel like Archangelisk also changed shape in some way, right? Or
Yeah, I
is this
redrew
just...
the shape of some tiles, but they stayed the same mostly. This border is a bit reworked. As you can see, Karelia is now on Russian ground. There is some minor changes in how that border is set up to make it so that Sweden has a more natural attack onto Arkhangelsk
Yeah.
rather than Novgorod, to help Swedish-Polish alliances, because the most common alliances has been Poland-Russia or Russia-Sweden, and just attack Poland or Sweden. So we wanted to make sure that Sweden and Poland still had something going for them.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it makes sense that Russia would usually be the chosen ally, given that, like, there must be so much conflict over this area all the time, right?
Yeah, there is.
Uh,
And for Sweden to attack Poland, when you attack Poland as Sweden, you unlock so much potential gain because you unlock all of Europe, which
yes.
is
Which is...
because we've seen Sweden's like take over Poland and then going down to attack Austria or France, which is really fun.
Yeah, and of course this is very SC dense, whereas if you look at this area, maybe doesn't unlock as much, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Alright. So yeah, apart from Sweden then, this area here, was there anything else big that happened?
I think Europe was mostly unchanged outside of that because I'm still observing what the Austria and France changes um, end up in.
Okay. So yeah, as we can see that there's just very minor changes of the names, right? Pressburg and
Yeah.
Strasbourg.
Hmm?
Nice. It's kind of amazing to me that like Spain has stayed exactly the same through all of this, right?
Yep. I've considered just redrawing the internal structure of Spain just like visually, but I quite like how Spain functions, I think. I've considered breaking up the coast between Gibraltar and Valencia, adding a little tile there, but just to make convoys from the Ottomans into the Spanish peninsula, the Iberian peninsula, a bit easier. But let's see if that ends up in the game or not.
All right. Well, so with that, I think that's more or less Europe done then, right?
I think so, yeah.
Alright, so let's go back in time again to Alpha 1. So here we are a year ago when I was playing Bornu. We're gonna look at... I wanted to go through from like... Well, I wanted to start with Europe because Europe is obviously, as you mentioned, really the core of this variant, although obviously there's plenty going on everywhere else.
Yeah, of course.
But I also wanted to go through, like, in order of... From kind of the least changes to the most changes through this. So
Yep.
we're going to go to one of the regions that hasn't had that much change. And that would be down here in like Oceania / Southeast Asia, right? There have been
Yes.
changes, but not massive ones.
Yep.
Okay.
Pretty much.
So we're here on the very first iteration again. We're back in Alpha 1. Was there anything that was going through your mind when you were setting up this area, when you were first creating the map?
Mostly, where do I want to place the Dutch centers? Because the Dutch had holdings on Sulawesi, which is the weirdly shaped island to the right.
This one here?
Yep, and then Malacca, which is right there, yeah.
Yeah.
But also on Java, in Batavia, right there. But I chose to not have a Dutch center in Batavia, to make that whole area like Portuguese homeland.
Yeah. I guess that's always something you're going to be wrestling with making a historical variant like this, right? Because historically, there were some powers that were just very dominant in certain areas, and you don't want to make them too
Yeah.
dominant because then other powers get locked out, right?
Yeah, we're gonna see a lot of that in South America later when we get there, because Spain, of course, historically has dominance over South America, if you could say so. Uh, so that's quite an interesting challenge to wrestle. But okay, so Southeast Asia had a couple issues. I noticed during the first alpha. The first one being that Ayutthaya and Netherlands always went to war. The Indonesia was just too valuable for Ayutthaya, and the Dutch were just too big of opposition and too close.
Yeah.
Um,
I guess this center here would be the major issue there, right?
yeah, exactly.
Because as Ayutthaya, I certainly wouldn't want to let any Dutch fleet sort of get into this area.
Yeah, exactly. And secondarily, the other issue we have had with the area was Ayutthaya completely crushing the Dutch every time. And Ayutthaya just being, in general, the strongest power on the map.
Man, things have changed a lot, because I don't think Ayutthaya is the strongest power anymore.
So the main reason for that, if you take a look at like Vietnam, there's a lot of centers there. And a lot of those are just very natural for Ayutthaya to get early in the game, like Phu Xuang, Phan Rang, Ava, Pegu, Andaman, kinda, Sambas, and so on. There's a lot of potential Ayutthayan centers. And then they got them all. And then they were super strong and crushed everyone.
Yeah, and they can get those ones notably, like, while still fighting the Dutch, right? They can just send a couple units up here to clean up this area, as long as they have an alliance with Ming or something similar. They can still just send their fleets out this way.
Exactly. Yeah, and in A1, the Ming Ayutthaya alliance was super common, due to how vulnerable the Mughals were, due to just them having a lot of colonial neighbors. Were very close, so they had a rough time. So main ideas I had for A2 was weakening Ayutthaya and trying to disentangle the Dutch and Ayutthaya. So if we go on to the next map.
Got it. Yep.
We can see a couple changes. To begin with, Malacca was moved to Batavia, and a dot, one of the dots in Vietnam was removed, and of course the center on the Malay Peninsula was removed as well, which just in general reduced the number of centers a lot, close to Ayutthaya.
Yeah. So I do also note this is now an army. Was that to try and make sure that there wasn't as much conflict between these two from these units?
Yes, kind of. It was both made for that purpose, but also to make sure that they didn't overpower the Portuguese colony in Timor.
Gotcha. Yeah.
But I think a large reason why that actually was an army was that for a while I actually had a 4-center Dutch colony here, because I had Malacca as well, and I didn't want them to be overpowered in the region, and therefore I placed an army, and then I removed the colony and stayed an army.
Got it. Right. So how well do you think this worked then, in terms of, I guess it definitely neutered Ayutthaya a fair bit, because I'm currently playing on these maps, I haven't seen an Ayatollah run away with the game in the same way that they did in Alpha 1, right?
Yeah, Ayutthaya is now pretty balanced power, I'd say. Uh, it's slowly getting a bit more like dynamic in its alliances to throughout some minor changes across Asia. So I'd say it's improving. It's not a perfect power yet, but hopefully we can continue to improve it. The main issue is still that they like to go to war with the Dutch very early on, almost every time, and I don't like that. So one of my goals will be to make it so that Italy and Spain can more easily come into conflict.
Got it. Yeah, I guess the main way of making that happen might be to get more fleets out to this side, or more natural fleet expansion that way. That
Yeah, I for a long while considered a pre-core for Italy and Fanra.
ooh,
To make it so that they had a lot more like naval presence in the east, in like Bay of Tonkin and South China Sea. But so far I haven't pulled that trigger.
got it.
But we will do some other changes to try to encourage conflict.
Hmm.
And I think we're already ready for the next map, kinda.
Got it. Well, I think there was one more change. In fact, before we
Oh
do
yeah,
that change, I do want to congratulate you on managing to find a name that fits in this province.
yeah, I know, right? That part of the peninsula is just called Kra, and I was so happy when I noticed.
Did you like draw these borders with the name in mind? Like just
Yep.
yep. Well, it looks
So
pretty
some
natural, so well done on
yeah, if you look at, for example, India, you can see like Masulipatam, the British colony.
that. Yep.
That didn't work out.
I have played in this area during Blitz games. These names are
Yeah,
just hell.
yeah. But if you look for example, Penair too, it's just like oh, it just fits. And is it like Surat is also that way. I had to change the border slightly of the Mughal Empire to make it fit.
That's brilliant. It's not something I notice unless I was looking at the map like I am right now, right?
Yeah.
Examining the actual borders themselves. It's pretty cool how you've done it. It still looks like an actual border. Um,
Yeah, but there's a lot of small things like that where I had to change borders to make the names fit.
yeah. Alright, so the other change that happens from A1, I think, a pretty major
Oh
one,
yes,
although maybe it's not
that's
that
huge.
major, because I've never
You
seen
are right.
anyone in Outback. But the
Yeah,
Outback
I
becomes a province, right?
yeah, I'm actually pretty disappointed with it. Because in A1 I had this feeling that Australia was this very contended area, and that if you owned Australia, you could use it as a springboard towards Asia or Africa or whatever you wanted to. Um, so I wanted to make it so that you could more heavily invest in Australia by convoying an army there. But I've seen one or two armies there, but it hasn't really had a huge impact,
Yeah.
sadly.
I mean,
But
so one of the most annoying things for me about the game that I played, my Spain game, was that we got an Aymaran army convoyed into Gunai, and they got forced out of Gunai, and they disbanded it instead of retreating
oh
here. I
no,
was
no
like,
way!
oh, it's so close. We nearly got to see the legend.
That's so
But no,
sad.
it didn't quite happen.
Yeah, I remember one game where the Mughals went rampant and they controlled Australia, and they had an army in the outback.
That's
So that was
That's
very
actually
cool.
very cool, right? I think Mughals is maybe well, okay, so Mughals have to expand pretty hard south in order to get this, right? But a power that's
Yeah,
adjacent to Indian Ocean is maybe best placed to take advantage of this because they can convoy
mm,
into Kimberley, then move their
exactly.
army into Outback, and a fleet follows it up to here, and then they have two on either Waggiman or Gunai, depending on
Yeah,
which way they want to go. So
yep.
Hopefully we see that someday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One last thing was of course that Timor got a bit more isolated, and it got more access to centers, including Dani, Gunai, and such, which has made this Portuguese colony like into a proper powerhouse, even though it's only one center. It's very safe back in its little corner, and it has a lot of centers to claim. So even though it's not a huge colony, it plays a huge part in politics of the area.
Yes. And this becomes a pre-core, right? Which it wasn't
Exactly.
in the first edition. That's pretty huge for a one dot colony because it means
Yeah, to have a precore.
you can obviously the difference between a one dot and a two dot colony is huge because it's effectively
Yeah.
double the amount of units you can pump out, right?
Yep. Yeah, it's a big change.
Yeah.
Yeah, I in general I really like the where this Portuguese colony is at right now. It has a lot of potential and playmaking potential in the minigame, which is nice.
Yeah, I mean, I agree completely with this. There's a whole thing around Blitz 2, which was a game I played in as Portugal with King of Prussia, that we recorded a video
Right,
on,
you
and
played
I
Portugal.
haven't finished editing yet, so I can't talk that much about it yet. But this
Yeah.
area plays a huge part, especially the fact that you're immediately adjacent to Flores, right? So you can kind of contest that with the Dutch, but in order to do that, you have to not go for your pre-core in year one,
Exactly.
it makes for such an interesting dynamic here of like,
Yeah.
do I want to go for the center that like guarantees me more space, or do I want to go for the one that will guarantee me more kind of buildability? I love it.
Yeah, exactly. I think that choice is very fun.
All right, so as you said, you like where this is at. I assume this colony won't change very much through the next two iterations, right?
Yep. There's I think there's one more change in Indonesia across the two coming maps. So
Okay. Shall we jump ahead and have a
Indonesia.
look?
Yeah.
All right, so if we remove this one, can I spot it? Oh, well, there's one. Does that count as in Indonesia?
Yeah.
That's yeah.
Yeah. That's the change I'm talking about.
Do you want to talk about it?
Sure. So basically, as I said, we wanted to make sure that Spain and Ayutthaya were a bit closer. We added this island tile, Palawan, to make sure that Ayutthaya could convoy into the Philippines, if they wanted to, or just have like have a tile that they could access very quickly on from Natuna Sea.
Man, Natuna Sea becomes so important now, right? It's got like these three around it, but it's also just got access to so much of where you want to be going.
Yeah, Natuna Sea is the tile to control as Ayutthaya.
Absolutely.
It's very important.
All right. So is that the only change that happens here then?
Okay. We do merge the tiles Lansang and Saravan up in Ayutthayan territory.
Yeah.
Just to make it a bit more compact. But it's not had a huge like effects on the map. But we just thought there was just a bit too many tiles there. Ming had a bit too much space to work with there, making Ayutthaya defeat much quicker than we'd like it to be.
Got it.
So this is what we talked about previously with France and Austria, where the number of tiles on the border impacts how quickly or slowly a conflict can be played out.
Yeah. So if we look at A2 here, I mean, they can head that way. It just means that this...
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not a very impactful change.
Okay, yeah, it's certainly not as massive as the one in Europe between France and Austria, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. The other thing I noticed here, I guess it's actually straying more into Asia territory now. This is... but yeah, and
that's a big change.
Should we talk about this here, or should we talk about this when we get to it? Okay.
Sure. So we wanted to make it so that Ayutthaya had a more natural path into India more early on. So giving them access to the very important Isle of Andhra coast should be quite interesting, I think.
Yes.
But it also does open up potential for Mughal English cooperation against Ayutthaya.
Ooh, that is true. Yeah, you can get into Bay of Bengal and Andhra Coast straight away, and then force. I guess Andaman is an incredibly important SC for. Well, not SC. Sea tile for Ayutthaya as well.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Alright.
Very nice.
Nice. So then, unless there's anything else you want to talk about in B1-2, I guess we can move to B1-3. Did anything change
Yep.
there?
I don't think so.
Oh,
Yeah, it's unchanged.
there is one thing that changes, but I think it has more to do with South America than it does with Southeast Asia. So, well,
Yep.
it's this specifically, just in case I was teasing people. Two of those provinces disappear. But we'll cover this when we get to that, right?
Yep.
Alright, so we shall go back in time again, all the way back to Alpha 1, and now we will be looking at Asia. The rest of Asia.
Yeah. Asia is a very interesting region because it's the region with the least colonial impact, kind of. There's a lot of very big regional powers, and not that many strong colonies.
Yeah, there are quite a lot of weak colonies, right, with regard to...
Yeah.
I mean, especially in this first iteration, we got 3 different powers in India, or 3 different colonies. But none of them are particularly...
Yeah, there's a lot of weak colonies.
Yeah.
But...
I guess Macau and Formosa are the other 2 to point out on that front.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so...
Very nice.
Was that your focus when you were looking at Asia, when you were first creating Alpha 1? Like... Or was that just a natural result of where the colonies were in like, actual history?
It kind of is just a natural result of how history played out. Because a lot of Asia is landlocked. And the colonials weren't that interested in landlocked spaces because trade happens across water.
Yes. That makes sense.
Of course, there was the Silk Road and stuff, but yeah,
Yeah.
that was too hard to control as a colonial power, I suppose. Anyways, so yeah, I noticed pretty quickly during developing that this was going to be the area that had the biggest regionals and the least colonial impact.
Mm-hmm.
Which shapes for a unique area of the map. That's in general something I think is something you'd like to strive on towards on this big of a map. You want to give each area on the map its own unique flavor, if possible.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Like, make the different regions play out in slightly different ways, or have, like, different negotiation dynamics, I guess, is the big thing there. Yeah.
Yeah, so that people can choose a different power depending on what kind of dynamics they want to play out.
Nice. Alright. Well, yeah, so before we look at the differences from Alpha 1 to Alpha 2, I did want to look at, like, there's some very interestingly shaped provinces over here, right?
Yeah.
Were there any particular reason for these? Were these, like, historical as well, or...
Yes, kind of. Gansu has been such a pain while designing this variant, honestly. And like this weird stick of the Qing Dynasty too, with a ho-ho. It's a very interesting geography to have to work around. And I have been troubled by them, to say the least. They have limited the way I've been able to set up dynamics of certain areas, because that's something you have to play around when you're making a variant, because certain borders just look certain ways and we have to play around them. At least if you wanna try to have historical borders for your maps.
Yes, so that was a big focus here then. I guess I should say I'm like not a historian at all. So I'm
Yeah.
really bad at recognizing where the actual borders were and how they might be different, but I assume this was an important part of the Ming Dynasty, right?
Mm. Yeah. I'm a diplomacy historian.
Yeah.
I'm I'm not that good at history, but as I'm developing more and more diplomacy maps, I learn, which is a fun like side effect of building diplomacy maps.
I mean, I yeah, I would say I haven't done that for building maps, of course, but in the sense of I know a lot more about like the First World War than I would have
Yeah.
known if I hadn't played diplomacy.
Yeah.
And like in the same
Like
way
I
here,
think it's really fun.
I have there have been times where people have been talking to me about, because obviously I'm friends with a lot of people who do know history because I'm into diplomacy, where they have mentioned regions and I'm like, I know where that is because I've played Imperial Diplomacy.
Yeah, exactly. Uh, yeah, there's like where just when I like watch the news or something, and oh wait, I recognize that place name. I placed it on my map.
So yeah, I hope you know you are educating the general populace, or at the very least you're
Yeah.
educating me in some way.
Yeah.
Alright, so from this, there will obviously be some changes. This is a pretty massive region that we're looking at right
Yeah,
now,
it is.
between A1 and
Yeah.
A2. Where do you want to focus on first in here? Because, yeah, there are a few
Okay.
changes there. Right?
So, okay, let's just start with like stating the concerns I had after Alpha 1, because I think that's always the way you should think about um, improving your map. What's the problems I'm facing right here? What some patterns that I want to prevent, and how can I manipulate uh, the different powers choices? So the difficulties we had here was that Safavid was far too weak. They were a really not powerful power.
Yep.
Mughal always ended up losing to a Thai alliance, pretty much.
Yeah.
Qing and Ming had too easy of a time staying loyal to each other, and Qing and Russia always went into conflict.
Gotcha.
So these were my concerns with the area post Alpha 1. And oh, okay, one more actually. Tokugawa had a bit too rough of a time getting onto the mainland.
Got it.
So those were my concerns with the map after first playtest. So I suppose we go to A2.
Okay, so I guess we'll start with the one you mentioned first, which was Safavid being
Yeah.
too weak, right?
Yeah, sounds good. So I started with just interconnecting their supply centers a bit more to make them more defensible, because when supply centers are close together, they're more easy to defend. So that was huge, just making them a bit more harder to attack. The next change was making it so that they had more potential tempo into Arabia. This was made by adding the dot in Kishim, a tile that previously did not exist.
This one down here, yeah.
Yep. And this made it so that Safavid actually had like a very easy way of getting into Arabia quickly, which helped them out a ton, really. And those were really like the two main changes for Safavid. I didn't want to like overcompensate and buff them too much, so just slightly tweaking them, adding some small stuff, and then launching it and seeing where we end up.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to announce that Safavid is very much a playable power after this, and it's become pretty much a community favorite at this point, which I think is super fun.
Yeah, speaking as someone who's playing as Russia on this version of the map, I'm annoyed at how playable Safavid is.
Yeah, some of it has become like this very aggressive power that has a really strong opening into the Ottomans. Because that border has so many tiles, so wars go very quickly there.
Yep, you can mobilize a lot of armies this way very fast.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that actually isn't any change on this side, right? That's just the changes to make them less weak to attacks from this side. Yeah, this is all still the same.
Yep. And I wanted it to leave it like that because I wanted Safavid to have strong openings. It will be modified a bit later, but I think Safavid are generally in good shape for this.
Gotcha, alright. So, the next thing you mentioned was Mughals getting pummeled every game, right? And there are some huge changes here, right?
Yeah, there really is. So the really biggest ones, like with impact on Mughals' performance, is the north. Because as you can see, there was actually an impassable tile added in the Himalayas, which made them a lot more defensible against the Ming. And additionally, the center in Tsangpa was removed, which made it so that Ming had less motivation to just support themselves into Tsangpa after taking Susu and Rinpoche.
Yeah, because that's a very natural opening in Alpha 1, right? You go here and here in the first turn and then immediately kick the Mughals out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that was very powerful. So this made it so that they have a more defensible northern front, which allowed us to play around a lot more with the south. The south had a complete rework of like colony placements.
Yep.
As I both noticed some in historical blah blah blah. I can't speak English. With Masulipatam actually being English at the time, and Ceylon being Dutch at the time.
Right. I was gonna ask about that, right? Because between most of these, we haven't generally seen an area change ownership at the start of the game between these things. Because I assume the ownership was based on some historical fact, right? So here it was just because of initial inaccuracies.
Yep. So basically, pretty much during the time of Imperial Diplomacy, there's a Dutch-Portuguese war, where a lot of the colonies go from being Portuguese to being Dutch. And Ceylon is one of those.
Got it. Okay. And this pre-core in Surat, I assume there was still British presence here, but you couldn't have it because it's just too strong, right?
Yeah, exactly. Surat was the first English colony in India, so I wanted to leave some legacy behind and let them have a pre-core there.
I would say, I think I've never seen an England be able to use this pre-core, although I suppose I also haven't seen that dominant of an England game, so maybe they can use it
I've seen England take all of Mughal and all south of Mughal before, so in that game I think they used Serat actually.
Okay.
But it's not. So there has been very dominant England colonies in India, but you guys had a pretty good India colony in the Blitz game, right?
Yes, but in that game, I think we worked pretty solidly with Portugal to push out Mughals, so we ended up taking like this side of India rather than going over to Surat. In order to get to Surat, I think you kind of have to fight both, which is tough.
Yeah, it's not a very strong pre-core, but it's there for legacy.
Yeah, I think it's nice to have some historic touches on the map, and it doesn't really affect gameplay that much, right? So it's a nice thing to have.
Yeah, I remember, because England is one of the stronger powers on the map. Someone joked that the only nerf they needed was to lose the pre-core in Surat.
Alright.
Obviously, it fixes them.
So, were there any other changes here? I guess Portugal got their dot moved to Koshan? Or...
Yeah, the Cochin.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there's a lot of smaller changes, so we can't really talk about all of them because there was just like complete redraws. But I think we have talked about the effect on the changes. The area is interesting. It still has improvement potential by adding more tension between England and Portugal across the map. But should be interesting to see how the area evolves.
I did also want to point out there's a whole island chain that doesn't exist in Alpha 1 that comes into existence here. Does this...
Hello there, Maldives.
Yeah. I assume this was because you wanted more to fight over next to the Indian Ocean, or...
Yep.
Yeah.
The Indian Ocean was a bit boring, and I also wanted a center that Portugal and the Dutch could had to negotiate over here in the first season.
That makes sense. Yeah, because I think otherwise it's kind of natural for the Dutch to just leave, right?
Yeah. Yeah, either that or go for Andaman Islands.
Oh yes, of course.
So, I think we've seen one Dutch go for Madurai in India, but it's not a very easy center to go for because the English units in Madras really want to go there.
Yes.
Most of the times.
I agree, right. And I mean Portugal can also just go there. There's a lot
exactly.
of contesting
So
for that.
It's our Belgium.
Yes.
It's not as well designed as Belgium, but I tried.
All right. So you said other issues potentially. These guys were running over Mughals. That's kind of been helped by these changes here. Were there any other changes like in this region that you made to that effect?
Not really. I hope that the Mughal changes should be enough to stabilize the region a bit more, and I think mostly it worked. The area could still be improved a bit because now a Thai-Mughal alliance is a bit common instead, but because Ming is just very interconnected with all the neutral centers, so it's very easy to just bounce from the neutrals directly to Ming.
Yeah, that makes sense. Alright, well, if we look at more, you also mentioned that these two were allying too easily, right? So the change from Alpha 1 to Alpha 2 with regard to that was...
Yeah.
This right here?
That's very big. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I still wasn't super sure of how I wanted to change the area, and honestly, I'm still not. But it did improve it. Just making it so that Ming could actually put 2 units on Ho-Ho. Just right off the bat, improved the dynamics a bit there.
Okie dokie.
And the changes that happened to Tokugawa, making it so that the army in Kyoto can actually walk over to Korea, made it so that Tokugawa just in general made it so that there was more conflict between the two because they were just more interested in the area.
Gotcha. Yeah, I hadn't noticed this, that there is now an island chain there. In case people don't know, in Imperial Diplomacy, these island tiles you can just walk over with armies, so from one side to the other, which, yeah, definitely helps here, because I think Kyoto pretty much always wants to go here, right?
Yeah, it's a very common move.
Technically it has the option of going here as well, but there's not much more it can do from there, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's better to go to Fusan and then try to win either Ming or Qing's trust by supporting one into the other.
Gotcha. Alright, so was there anything else you want to talk about here? I guess also any changes on the Russian front?
Yeah, I think some shit. Biratia was nerfed. But I think that was the only change because it was an insane tile during A1. Like if you go back, it was connected all the way to Karakoram, I think.
Oh my god, yeah.
Like,
okay.
And 2 of the Qing home centers was connected to it, so it was adjacent to 6 supply centers.
That, yeah, that is a pretty impressive tile. I mean, this style, speaking of someone again who's currently playing on the A2 map, so
Yeah,
this one right here,
this one.
this tile is still incredibly important, even without those
Yeah, it
connections.
is.
So, it's, yeah, I think that was a correct change.
You can only imagine how tough that tile was for Russia in A1 then. They
Indeed.
pretty much had to bounce there every time.
Yeah, and it's really kind of tough to bounce if they have 2 units on it to
Yeah.
start.
Exactly. Yeah, it was horrible.
Alright. So, does that cover more or less everything from A1 to A2? Was there anything?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
So I still had the problem of Qing and Russia being too closely connected, and I don't think we see a lot of changes for the first beta map in this area because I had to cook the Russia changes for a while longer, but we can move on. Oh wait, did we move on? Yes, we
Yeah,
moved
so
on.
I just moved from A2 to beta, and the main thing I noticed was the change in Russia color, right? That's,
Yeah. Yeah, there was 3 changes in the area between these 2 maps, and it was the Russia color. It was the Qing Precore in Pyongyang
Yes.
in Korea, which was made to nerf Tokugawa, just Qing being able to output more fleets.
Got it.
Uh,
I do kind of love
and
that just from an iterative perspective, right? You've managed to get them more interconnected, but Tokugawa is a bit too strong in the area, so you make a different change so as not to undo the good that you've done with the last thing, right?
yeah, that's the process. You do small changes. You think about, oh, okay, how does this actually impact the map? Maybe if you have the time and so, you do a playtest and see, oh, okay, I see that and that in player behavior. Do talk to your players, by the way. Getting their feedback just firsthand is super good. I ended up doing this little change just to slightly help Ching against Tokugawa.
Mm-hmm. Alright, and I noticed that the capital also moves, right? From Edo to
Yes.
Kyoto.
So both of those were kind of historically accurate, which is interesting. Uh, one was where the shogun resided, and one was where the emperor resided. Pretty sure. So both are kind of historical um, capitals during this period.
Got it. And
Which is
you wanted to move this out of the way so it's not as easy to just walk into, I assume, right?
yeah, exactly. Since you can't win if you don't hold your capital, having the capital in Edo made it so that Tokugawa was overly protective of NPO in general.
Yes. So in my Spain game, my Tokugawa was constantly like filling this area with fleets and Death Starring out.
Yeah.
So just like putting 4 supports on a single move, just so that they wouldn't ever lose this area.
Yeah.
I think they still have to be fairly protective of it, right? Just
They do.
because
100%.
it's so important.
NPO will change a lot in the next patch. It will be a lot more contested, so we'll have to see how that impacts Tokugawa. But Tokugawa is one of the stronger regionals right now, so hopefully it should be good for Tokugawa's balance.
Okay, so were there any other changes here between A2?
I don't think so.
Oh, it looks like it was just slight border redrawing, right? I guess this is
Yeah,
the
okay,
other
there's one in Safavid, actually.
Ooh.
2 in Safavid. So to begin with, Herat was made adjacent to Sind.
Okay. There.
And the sea tile between Safavid and Mughals was made to not touch Muscat as well.
Got it. So what was the logic behind that one?
Mainly that I wanted to make sure that Portugal and Safavid could maintain an okay relationship. But Gulf touching Muscat made it so that Safavid couldn't really play with fleets at all, which was a bit sad.
Right.
So just like trying to decrease the tension between the two powers, to increase potential for friendship. This also made it so that Muscat can open for Mara, which is interesting.
Oh, down here.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, instead of Rustak, but they always go to Rustak still, which I think they should.
Yeah, I mean, in my Blitz game that isn't out yet, of course, I also just go for Rustak because it just feels natural to try and consolidate the area, right? It
Yeah.
might actually make more sense to try and establish more of a control over this area as a whole, but
Yeah,
no one ever wants to because it doesn't feel safe.
yeah, pretty much. You don't want to leave it to Sapovid.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess that's about it for B12 then. Shall we go on to B13?
Yeah, so this is where I actually like make my Russia changes.
Yes. That is
This
a
is
big
the
change.
map that I launched. Yeah, so I split up Russia pretty much. I didn't think that the long, lanky Russia approach worked at all because it put them way too close to Cheng. Just them being that far east made it very hard to design a fun and interactive Cheng that wouldn't just go all into Russia. So I wanted to put some distance between the two. And to do this, I thought I could make just Asia less important for Russia in general, and make it more of a little colony, kind of. Separated by this Siberian tundra tile. So the idea between this was to still make it so that Russia is able to very quickly transfer units between their fronts, and also having it as a small Death Star to make their initial push to the south.
Into this kind of region, or?
Exactly.
Yeah, nice. I do remember laughing when I heard this tile. I don't know if you gave it this name or someone else in the community did, but hearing this being called High Trees, which of course this is High Seas, right? It works. It works.
Yeah, there was a lot of suggestions. I had like a high tundra, high snows, high taiga, a lot of different names.
Yes, so this is a really interesting one. I'm interested to see how much use it sees, right? Because it feels like it's quite out of the way of a lot of the other powers, so people won't be attacking through it, generally speaking.
Yeah, exactly. It's a tile that Russia really needs to protect, because if people start getting control of it, they can Death Star Russia.
Yes.
So while we split up Russia, we still make a very important tile in the center that they want to control, and while allowing quick travel to the east, to kind of recreate the historical dynamic of where Russia were this time, where they were very rapidly colonizing the east. So that was the main feel I wanted to get here. They are still very much an European power in this version of the map, but they're starting to establish their eastern half.
Yeah, and I know they have Yakutsk as a pre-core here.
Yeah.
I assume so that they can get like fleets out if they really want to. Or...
Exactly, because we have a new contender for Asia.
Yes, I see this. This is obviously not here in the previous edition. This is Inuit.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, exactly. It's not a new power, but it's rather a new colony for a regional over in North America, which we'll get to later. So I actually think this solves a lot of my problems with the area. So Cheng has previously been a power with very few neighbors, only Russia, Ming, and Tokugawa, which has made them uninteresting. So I wanted to add fourth neighbor to them, being the Inuits, But of course, also Tokugawa was a bit too strong. There was not really a naval power in the area that naturally contained them. So having Inuits as a potential naval power to compete with Tokugawa should like slow them down a bit.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's super interesting. Was there a historical basis at all to this, or was it just like, I really want to extend this power out a little bit more?
The Inuits were in Kamchatka as well,
Okay, nice. But yeah,
so there's very much historical basis for it.
and I know the fleet is on this coast here. I assume that was a deliberate
Yeah,
choice to put them in contention for all of this, right?
exactly. And all of a sudden, centers like Sahalian, or wait, what is it called nowadays?
I have no idea.
Wait, uh,
Are you googling it right
uh,
now?
no, I can't remember. Whoa, okay, I need to check that later. But it's a very similar name. Uh,
Mhm.
Same start. Anyways, but I really hope that putting Inuits to this area should complicate the diplomacy a bit, and just like bringing Inuits overseas a bit more, which I think should be really fun.
Yes, which I guess we'll talk about more when we get to North America.
Yep.
Alright. So were there any other big changes in Asia during this patch, or was that mainly
Um,
it?
there's more. There's more.
Okay.
So Ming, you see that weird arm that they have? It's now center.
Oh, yes. So it is. And this one
Uh,
is not anymore, right? Was that in that?
yeah, because Cheng is actually just a 4 center.
Okay.
Because one of Cheng's issues was that they're kind of cornery. So if they don't go very quickly, they have a very tough time keeping up with their victory condition. So decreasing the size of them, similar to how we did with Sweden, to decrease their win condition, should hopefully make it easier to reach their win condition.
Mm-hmm. And
While go on.
sorry, you carry on.
And it also puts a bit less pressure on Russia, of course,
Yes.
with their now much weaker presence.
Specifically, they're not inclined to go for this kind of area, right?
Exactly.
Immediately. So was that the reasoning for this one specifically being the one you removed over, say,
Yeah,
Chichihar, I guess, or Highland
yeah, exactly. And I've always wanted to have a center in Gansu because I wanted to form more of a triangle dynamic between Ming, Qing, and Russia. Um, Similar to how the classic map is laid out, with the western triangle of Germany, France, and England, and the eastern triangle of Turkey, Austria, and Russia. Imperial Diplomacy also have a lot of like smaller power triangles, which is, in my opinion, the best way to design a map, because it's just naturally creates interesting dynamics.
Yeah, and it plays into kind of what diplomacy is all about, right? Which is
Exactly.
it's a triangle diplomacy is kind of diplomacy as its purest form, right? You have two other
Exactly.
people, and you have to go to one of those people and say, "Hey, kill this other person with me."
Yeah, exactly. It's really the core of diplomacy, and I try to create as many triangles on this map as possible.
Yeah.
The other reason for putting a center in Gansu was that after A1, Ming had a bit of a tough time to actually reach Mughal from the north, due to the Himalayas. So just putting them closer to stuff like Yarkand should make it so that Ming can come from the north and go into Kabul and such more often.
Got it, right. So they can go into, like, if they're attacking Mughals, they go into Rinpoche and Bahamo, of course, but then they come in via this direction as well. That's,
Exactly.
yeah, that's an interesting one. I'm very interested to see how it plays out. Right.
Very cool.
So, other changes. Were there any?
Yeah, one small change to Safavid, with adding the small tile called Kurdistan, to slightly decrease tension between Safavid and Ottomans, because I am afraid that due to this now stronger Russian presence, the two might be weaker. So have them both having a bit safer border could help compensate that strength increase in Russia.
Got it. And it should be noted it is a bit safer. It's still not very safe, right? In that
Yeah,
Safavid can
can still
walk
put...
into these two in the first turn, for example.
Exactly. Yeah. And because there is an opening, we actually have named openings, it's crazy, called Schrudelkrieg. So there was this player called Schrudel, and he made a blitzkrieg at Safavid against Ottomans, where they opened with Bandarabas, Isfahan, Tehran, and Tabriz, all towards the Ottomans, taking Baghdad and Trebizond the first year.
That's I'm impressed. Did they actually win with that, or was it?
I don't think they won, but they did pretty well across during the game.
Nice. But yeah, I also think this border just looks a bit nicer with Kurdistan there, to be honest.
I do agree. It's a very nice looking tile.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I can imagine as well, because these are SVGs, right? I mean, I've imported them to paint at the moment, so they're not SVGs anymore, which is why they get very blurry when I zoom in. But this must be incredibly annoying to try and, make all these borders in the first place, right? Just how squiggly they are.
Yeah, I draw this map on my laptop, and I have a pen that I can use on my screen.
Oh, okay. That's
So it's a bit like drawing on paper.
Okay.
Which allows me to just vibrate my hand.
Nice. I was just thinking drawing these with a mouse would be. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah. All right. So, were there any other changes in Asia that you want to talk about? I guess
there's a small one splitting Sind into Sind and Multan, but
where is Sind? Here, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was split into two tiles, just to make sure that Sind wasn't too valuable, because it touched 3 home supply centers of the Mughals.
I guess that also makes this area a little easier to attack, right? With 2 instead of 1.
Yeah, it's a bit less explosive, but it's easier to traverse.
Gotcha. Okay. Right. Was there anything in the Middle East? I guess I don't know whether we're covering this with Africa or whether we are doing this with.
Actually, I believe the entirety of the Middle East is unchanged since A1.
Okay, we can have a look here. I mean, I think, you are correct. Wow. The only thing I'm noticing is that the fleet changes from having a flat top to a rounded one.
Yeah, that's weird. I don't think I messed around with it, so that's weird.
Alright. Well, yeah, that's impressive. So this is another Spain-style region. It just stays.
Yes. So some areas I just designed the map around rather than change itself. In general, I like how Arabia is set up, so I modify what's around it instead.
Got it. Right. So things like Keshem, for example, right? Because that is one of the things that changed.
I have modified some sea tiles in the region, or a lot of sea tiles in the region, but the land itself has remained.
Okie dokie. Alright, so,
Alright.
Are you good to call Asia here, then?
Yeah, I think so.
Alright.
Awesome.
Well, wait, we never actually talked about the Portuguese and Dutch colonies here, but I guess they stay the same as well?
Yeah, they do stay the same, pretty sure.
Wow, everything here stays exactly the same. Well,
the seas are untouched.
Alright, well, let's go back in time to Alpha 1 again. And now we're going to be looking at a region that is very close to my heart because it was the first place I ever played in on this variant, right?
Yep.
So I played as Bornu in my first game, which I saw as being a really, really strong defensive power, right? This kind of tight group of 4 tiny SCs with quite large provinces around it just stood out to me as this is something I want to play because it seems incredibly defensible. And it was so defensible that it disappears.
Yeah.
Do you want
Yeah.
to
Born.
do you want to talk about
So
what you were thinking when creating this in the first place first?
so Africa was a bit hard to design, along with the 2 American continents as well, because there wasn't a lot of historically large powers in the region. So I couldn't really choose that much. So I did my research and I found that Abyssinia, Ajuran, Congo were large, and as well as Bornu. I had my initial concerns about Bornu, about it being landlocked and such, and it's something that we in general fix a lot about powers going into A2. We didn't like powers being landlocked because the seas are cool and fun and make for varied gameplay. But of course, as you said, the tile setup around Bornu was maybe not the most well designed. Um, because it has a lot of very natural statement lines. There's a very few tiles around, and as we have learned, when there's few tiles, everything goes slow, and it's hard to fight.
Yes.
So yeah.
Yeah, so there's a lot of other things obviously happening in Africa as well, and I think as we move forward, as you mentioned, like there are quite a lot of large tiles in Africa here, right? As we move forward in the over the versions, I think they're generally going to get a bit smaller.
Yeah.
Of course, in this region we see a massive change, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, there's a huge rework of Africa in general, between A1 and A2. And honestly, Africa will remain hard to design. It's hard to know exactly what I want to do with the area. But after A1, I thought that Bornu was a bit too undynamic. It's too far away from everyone. In general, that's the problem with Africa. Everyone's too far away. So I thought, can I find a power that is way closer to others? And how can I make it quickly reach the powers around it? And that is where we introduce Mali. Mali is a very interesting power that didn't last too long because it was very powerful. Just the concept of Mali didn't keep up. So as you can see, we actually added 2 colonies around this area too. We added the British dot in the Gold Coast, so that's actually also a center that switches ownership completely, and that is just simply due to everyone and their mom having a colony on the Gold Coast. So I could choose pretty freely.
Got it, yeah.
And I wanted to introduce as many colonials in the area, make Mali's choice of alliance and allegiance as complicated as possible.
Yep. And I mean, this is kind of a dynamic that you don't see anywhere else in the world, right? A lot of one center colonials around a much stronger central power, which kind of calls back to what you were saying earlier about making each region sort of an independent dynamic, right?
Yeah, this was when I first released the patch notes for Mali. People were so incredibly hyped because it's such a unique concept for a power. and just them having the Sahara Desert right next to them opens up so many like different places. If you have a unit there, you could attack the Ottomans, you can attack Portugal, you can attack the Dutch, you can attack Abyssinia. There's just so many options.
Yes. So, what were your general thoughts on, like, I guess you've mentioned this is, you were looking for another sort of colonial, it's not colonial, regional in the region
Regional.
that
Yeah.
could be surrounded by colonials, right?
Mm.
So I guess
So
the major change was Sahara Desert. Do you want to talk through that?
yeah, so Sahara Desert. When I designed Mali, I had just gotten the feedback that okay, you should look at ways of making it so that there is a lot of possible openings to begin with, which Mali did had. They have a lot of possible openings, but also like okay, Sahara is okay. What can I say about the Sahara? Sahara, it was made that way to make sure that to shorten the distance in Africa, because Mali is very far away from all their regional neighbors. Bornu was kind of close to both Abyssinia and the Ottomans, but Mali is like far, far away. So similar to the motivation of having the Siberian tundra, I wanted a method for this regional power to quickly transport units a long distance, and in many possible directions, which is why we introduced Sahara, to make sure that this power, while in their area, had to contend with all of these different small colonials in a lot of different small tiles, had the possibility of going into this highway and getting out into Africa proper to attack their bigger regional neighbors.
Got it, yeah. Alright, so were there any other thoughts around Mali that you wanted to cover?
Before or after A2?
Before A2, so going from A1 to A2, because I will
Uh,
definitely have some stuff to discuss about their power
yeah.
level.
I really thought it just looked like a really fun power. We were all concerned about its power level from the very start, but I thought it looked very fun.
Yes.
And thought to myself, if it's busted, I can balance it later.
Alright, let's come back to this then. Let's look at some of the other changes that you made from Alpha 1 to Alpha 2. So,
Yeah.
there are quite a lot of them, right?
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot to talk about. So I'll, instead of like talking about the individual changes again, I'll talk about the general concepts. So Abyssinia, of course, kind of lost their very close neighbor Bornu, and I wanted to make sure that they still had a lot of like, or more than two dynamic neighbors. So the way Central Africa was set up was designed that in a way where Congo and Abyssinia would meet where their neutrals were, to make sure that we started to try to find this triangle dynamic between the three regional powers in the southern parts of Africa.
Yep, so you see here, I guess, the Ajuran as well has access to Bunyoro. This is reachable by all three of them in the first year, right? So
Yep.
there's... It feels like this is kind of the center of the dynamics between all three. And then, of course, these are going to be adjacent to each other pretty quickly, and so on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, when we sometimes maybe do a bigger chaos game, do you notice what's special about Darfur, Mandara, Banda, and Nasandi?
Oh boy, it's another circle. God. The wheel must spin. This one has more of a chance of spinning.
Yeah, it's the Lagon wheel.
God, yeah, maybe with just 4 people, it might actually be possible to pull it off.
Yeah. Oh, wait, when we get to South America later, I'm gonna introduce the biggest wheel you've ever seen.
Oh boy. Were you
We'll take that
designing
later,
with
though.
wheels in mind at this? No, this was before the. Wait, was this before the Chaos
It's
game?
during Chaos.
This was
It was
during.
during Chaos.
Oh my god! So you were running Chaos at the same time as redesigning this map?
Yep.
That's insane. All right. So yeah, you've mentioned that the idea was to keep a power triangle between these two, right? So you make it so that they can reach each other a little bit more easily. Although I guess they could reach each other before. It's just like there's not as much to fight over, right?
Yeah, exactly. There's not as much to fight for, and in A1, Congo had a lot of reasons to go south.
Mm.
If we look, because
oh yes, of course. I do remember this dynamic from my first game. Yeah.
Yeah. So in this area, in A2, I aimed to set up 2 more power triangles. So if we go to the map, containing a Portugal, Congo, Adjuran.
So here.
And then the third one is Portugal, Adjuran, France.
Ooh.
Because France got added into the area with their colonies in Fort Dauphin and their Reunion.
And these, I know, are historical, right? Like France was in this area?
Yes, they were there.
Yeah.
Yep, they were.
Okay, and previously this was Dutch.
Because you see that there's 2 islands here, right?
Oh.
One is Reunion and one is Mauritius.
I see. So you just switched which island was the focus of this dot.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yep.
Alright, so the idea was to take Netherlands out of here and put an extra power in. And I guess this is... So this will have some more connections to what's going on with France in the rest of the world as well, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Because they're having dots added here, so they're probably being reduced in power somewhere else.
I actually believe they don't this early on. Because, so you see, I have this obsession with making sure that there is groupings of colonials that have the same number of supply centers. And so England was going up to 14, and I noticed that, wait, hold on, France, they need something.
Oh, I see. Right.
So yeah, it might be a bit unhealthy at some points within design, but it has inspired a lot of different ideas, and we'll go over them later.
Yeah.
But it's also the reason why I was inspired to do the English center on the Gold Coast, I think, just to keep some of the center counts identical.
God, it's...
I can't remember what inspired what at this point, but yeah.
Yeah. I do note, so in creating these power triangles that you said between Ajuran, you've also removed all of the colonials from this side of the continent, right?
Yes.
Was there a specific reason for that?
Yes. So, to begin with, I removed the Dutch from the area because the Dutch and Congo were just too close everywhere. Because if you look to the south, you see Dutch. If you look to the north, you see Dutch.
Yeah.
So they were just too interconnected, and that Dutch colony and just died every time, anyways. So, and then I removed the Portuguese colony to made it so that Congo and Portugal had a chance of remaining friends.
Yeah.
And together attacking Adron.
Yeah.
As part of this power triangle.
Right. Gotcha. Okay. And down here, I assume there were also some changes.
That's
pretty cool.
It's very similar, but this area I quite like, because there's this whole like dynamic of where does Reunion go? Does it go for Cape Co or Mapondo? Which in turn influences, does Saint Helena go to Benguela or Cape Coe? And where does De La Goa go to? Does it go to Mapondo or Sakalava? But if De La Goa go to Sakalava, Adran can't go to Sakalava, and yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting decisions here. Again, ties back to the whole every unit has multiple options to start the game out, right? Um, I do think so. The fact that this is now a Dutch prequel means that the Dutch are far more likely to go here than they would otherwise be.
Yeah, they
right? I assume that
That
was
is correct.
deliberate. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, but I mainly thought that of Benguela as a Congolese center, but I wanted to give the option. We also saw a lot of St. Helena's just moving into South Atlantic Ocean
Yes, because the Dutch have
to
stuff over
mobilize
here.
against Portugal and Brazil, for example.
Yeah. All right. So were there any other changes you wanted to go over from A1 to A2?
I don't think so.
All right.
I think that's it.
So
So
yeah, let's talk about what your issues were with this one then.
I'd like to hear what you thought about Mali. Actually.
Okay, so with Mali, if you look at the Blitz games, and of course one of them hasn't been released yet, but if the colonials around do get together and just crush Mali out, then Mali is a very weak power indeed. You know, the colonials absolutely have the power to eradicate them from the game. The problem is that if any one colonial chooses to work with Mali, Mali seems to just overrun this area every time. Or at least that was the impression that I got. Was that also...
That is correct.
Yeah.
So as soon as a single colonial leaves the coalition against Mali, they all lose.
Mhm.
Which is a very uninteresting dynamic, I think, because it's very binary. Either they all team up and Mali dies, or they don't and Mali kills them all.
Yes. And yeah,
I think there's a place for those kind of dynamics, but I don't know.
See, so there's a variant on V Diplomacy, right? And it's
Yeah.
called Fubar, which
Oh yeah, I've seen that one.
it's possibly the worst variant I've ever played, but it was designed with being a terrible variant in mind. And it has one power in the middle that has like 20 centers, and then a bunch of, I think they're like 2 center powers around the edge of it.
Shit.
And the idea
Yeah.
being is that if any of those powers don't, like, they have to coalition that giant power at the start of the game, right? And the kind of where it gets interesting is after you've coalitioned it down to a point where it's not so much of a threat. Then,
it's the same size as everyone else.
yeah, then the dynamics emerge, and it kind of works for Fubar because everyone immediately coalitions that power, right? They go down to a decent size, and then people start fighting. I don't think it works as much here, purely because Imperial is a global variant, right? So as soon as you've coalitioned Mali down, yeah, they have the chance to recover once they're on even footing with everyone else, but they won't have a chance to win anymore because they've been coalitioned and other people will beat them in the race. So
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, it works for some styles of variant, but not for this one, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I then had to find a solution. What do I do now? So I actually didn't touch this area until like 3 days before I needed to launch the patch. I had this idea of pure colonial West Africa going down. So just removing Mali, adding a French colony as well, and just making this into colonial battle royale.
Yes, and that is what actually happens, right?
Yes. So we also see 2 impassable zones in the Sahara. So this is very different from the very free-moving version in A2. But we do see that the Ottomans have the possibility of slipping down through Hagar to form a colony in West Africa as well. I personally really like the opening of going Cairo to Jalo, so you can back up that colony with a secondary unit. But the community has been a bit split on it. In general, though, okay, so to be clear, I think this is direction. This is the direction I should take West Africa in, because I don't think a regional works here. But it's worth to say that just because I waited so long with taking the decision, I kind of rushed it, which wasn't perfect. And this map in general was left to be quite unbalanced, with two of the colonials, Portugal and Netherlands, being completely busted. So as you can see, Dutch actually got a colony in South Home, and this made it so that Congo had no chance. So what we've seen pretty much every game of this patch is that Portugal and Netherlands together crush Congo super quickly, and they just both spiral out of control. We saw a game where Portugal soloed in 5 years.
Oh, bloody hell.
It's extreme.
Yeah, I would say that's pretty extreme.
It was played by very talented players. There were two of them actually, but that still is just obscene. So I can talk about the ideas I did here and not the execution, because we're gonna fix that in the next map, the map that I launched today. And I think in general the map should be more balanced now. We will make mistakes. So the idea here is, of course, to create this area that sparks colonial conflict. And just like adding an area where the colonials can fight each other brutally and just fight, which complicates their dynamics around the world, because they can't all just sit there.
Yep.
Or can they? Or can they? We haven't seen that yet. That's something. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I noticed this is really SC dense, right? You've got most of the supply most of the provinces here are supply centers, so you're kind of incentivizing them all to go hard into this area. But I guess, as you mentioned, like the Dutch being very strong in this region probably has an impact here too, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
The Dutch mostly run off to the south here, but of course they also push west or north against Ottomans or the English. The colony is a bit overtuned in this version of the map.
Got it.
But in general, I think the concept should work out. Now when I've properly balanced the powers a bit more around this area. In general, there was a lot of minor Portugal buffs in this patch that made them in total a bit overtuned. And that's one of the difficulties when designing a colonial power. You need to consider how each of their areas interact with their region, but also the overall power of the entire power and how it interacts with possible other colonial powers.
Yeah, so as we mentioned when we were covering Europe as well, right? It's very possible for a colonial to get very strong in one region and use that to pump extra units into another region to just win that as well when they kind of have no right to. So I can imagine that's a really tough thing to design around, right? You kind of have to account for, well, all of these regions have to be quite balanced, otherwise one of them being off balance a little can lead to a huge snowball effect.
Exactly, and that was what happened to Portugal in this game where they soloed in 5 years.
Yep.
It's I really recommend you looking at that game if you want to. I think it was Saffron.
Got it. Yeah, so in your Discord server, all of the games are linked, right? All of the different Discord servers for the games.
Exactly.
So you can
Each
go
game
into
has
any.
their own Discord server.
you can go into any of them and spectate them. The ongoing ones, you can actually ask to spectate a specific country or just generally spectate. You can get access to the press and watch the game as it happens, which is a really cool thing to do. But yeah, even once a game is finished, you can just go in and have a look at everything, which is kind of awesome. All right. So I guess we've discussed this. Are there any other major changes?
There's a couple changes to Ajuran here.
Right. Yes.
So Ajuran struggled a bit getting into the center of Africa because they're so disconnected from all the centers around them. And in general, if you want the power to go in a certain direction, connect them to the supply center chain. The chain guides all. So as you can see here, Bunjaro got this weird arm, which more heavily connects Ajuran to the central parts of Africa, which just naturally brings them into this center of the conflict.
Yeah, and they're very heavily incentivized to go here, right? Because they can go Marig into Bunyoro and Baidoa into Turkana or Kismayo, and then support themselves into Burundi as well. Just establish this immediate sort of outpost of multiple units, which
from which point they can then maybe go to Mongo and Lundaluba, or go up to Uramu and build an army in Marigo and go to Sidamo. So all of a sudden they have a bit more say on Congo and Abyssinia.
Yeah. All right. And I think like here they did have some access, right? They could go into Turkana and Kismayo at the same time, but it's not quite as strong because Bunyoro obviously is something all of them reach at the same time. Whereas here now it is just Ajuran control immediately. If you want to go for that, you have to contest Ajuran there. Okay, super interesting. Yeah, so were there any other changes you wanted to discuss here?
The sea layout was changed a little bit just to accelerate the pace of which Ajuran could output fleets into the Indian Ocean as well.
Got it, connecting them up to Seychelles Sea here. It's interesting because it also has the effect of making them a little less defensible, right? Having this little
it does.
Area.
Safety time.
Yeah. It's like, in general, just an area that has this kind of buffer zone away from a major throughput point of sorry, my brain is not working. Through point of fleets provides some extra safety. So here you can see it with Great Ardra, right? They've got a little buffer zone between them and where the fleets would generally come through. And here it's not quite as strong because you do still have it connected up to Seychelles Sea, and of course these ones are still connected to Somali. But that disappearing has like an effect of, yes, it makes them extra mobile and very much more aggressive, but it also makes them much less defensible at the same time. So it's a trade-off, right?
Yeah, kind of the same situation as Sweden here, because Sweden was a very defensive power, but now we're slowly just exposing them more and more to the world to make them able to play more aggressive.
Yes. Okay, nice. So yeah, were there any other changes here?
I don't think so, actually. Oh, never mind. Ooh. There's a huge one. The South Atlantic Ocean was connected to South Africa. So as you can see, the colony in St. Helena did actually disappear. It instead went to Sao Tome here. And I still wanted to have this dynamic where Dutch can go to South Africa. So right now, the unit in South America can actually go all the way to South Africa in the first turn.
I almost think it might be worth their while convoying. I mean, that gives away so much power in South America, but
it does. But that's a super cool opening.
Yeah.
Whoa. Yeah, I like that.
It's an interesting option, right? Because these tiles, we haven't really talked about them. The ones next to the like the high seas tiles, I hate controlling these tiles, because people will come into your high sea and then just nick them. And you have to keep units there at all times to make sure people don't nick them. So actually, but then if you do that, you're wasting your unit, right? There's no point in you having
Yeah,
the
exactly.
dot. So actually, the way you kind of are, I say are supposed to use them, there's no one right way to do stuff in diplomacy, but the way I felt they were best used is like you pick them up as a quick pickup when you need a dot, and then you don't care about them. You're like, okay, someone else can have them. Which, this being connected up to here makes Cape Koei one of those dots, right? It's like a throwaway dot, but it's also a core, so it leads to a really interesting decision of the Dutch of, do I really want to focus a lot of my strength on something that's taken so easily? If I do I want to, like, put a lot of effort into controlling South Atlantic Ocean? So that absolutely seems like a nice possibility from here, because you can grab St. Helena as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a
100%.
very interesting change.
Yeah, it should be interesting, I think.
Yeah. Alright, so, this was from Alpha 2 to B1.2, right?
Yep.
Were there any other changes here? Should we move on to Beta 1.3?
I think we're... okay, I guess there was some small changes to the Morocco area.
Oh, right, I haven't even looked at
in
this.
that in that the Canaries was pushed to touch the land.
Ooh, so the Spanish can just immediately build armies there and come out to join in the Thunderdome.
Exactly. Now you get it. So imagine you convoy that Madrid army to Tangier the first year, and then you can build an army in the Canaries and just walk into Tafilalit and the Regibat and start pushing against Portugal in Africa.
Interesting. Alright, so on the map before, when I was playing as Spain, right, I kind of claimed this region and then never bothered expanding any further south, despite this being the Sahara. I think this enables them to do that a little bit more easily, but I think as Spain, my instinct would still be run the armies up here first, right? Grab everything here.
That is likely that is still the correct solution, I think. Just like controlling Morocco as Spain is very important.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. But it's super interesting that they can get things out much more easily now.
Yeah, there's in the next patch we're gonna look at here. I'm gonna modify this area even further, and I think we're ready to move on to it. So
okay, let's have a look then.
So if you look at Tangier,
it's now a pre-core.
Yeah.
Interesting. Alright. Was this... I assume this border changes just to make it a bit more obvious what it connects to, because it doesn't change...
Yeah, and just make it a bit nice, like... bit more nice looking.
But yeah, that being a pre-core is really interesting. You're kind of investing Spain a lot more heavily into this area.
Yeah, so as we said, Portugal was really running ramped. And previously what we saw was that Spain and Portugal traded Rabat, Portuguese neutral, for Canaries, making sure that Portugal just kind of had the entire west coast for themselves. And I wanted to make Spain care more. The trade is also a bit more complicated to do now, because Canaries is not connected to Madeira Plains, which was previously Canary Basin, I think. We moved around some names.
Got it, yeah.
But Canaries is also now only a year away from both Sao and Nao.
Right.
Which means that Spain can get fleets into the Atlantic before they break the Caribbean.
That's pretty important. Like, I think that's huge. I was one of those Spain players who made the Portugal the Portugal trade for canaries with Rabat, right? Because it just makes sense to kind of consolidate things here. I think definitely
Yeah.
with this new setup, I would be much less inclined to do that. I would kind of just go, well, Portugal, this isn't yours to start with. I will kick you out if
Yeah.
you go here at all.
Yeah. We can still be friends, but Rabat is mine.
Yep. Nice. Oh, that's an interesting dynamic. I'm curious as to how that will play out.
Yeah, Spain and Portugal were a bit too friendly. We can't have that.
Yes. All right. I noticed.
Which is interesting. Like in general, that Spain and Portugal are as friendly with each other as they are, because they are like on top of each other in Iberia.
Yeah. I mean, as someone who was playing Spain, I feel like a big reason for that is just your interests in other parts of the world, right?
Yeah.
You don't have a lot to gain from immediately going, like, as Spain, you have these two to gain, right? And then you have a lot of places where you're alienating a potential ally by doing that.
Yep, exactly.
So yeah, again, it comes down to that whole colonial problem of how do you make these people actually want to attack each other?
Exactly. We want the regionals to be able to have good points where they can try to convince the colonials to attack each other.
Mm-hmm.
Because if the colonials can easily collaborate, why shouldn't they?
Yeah.
It gotta be a bit more complicated than that.
Alright. While I was looking around here, I noticed another new precore over here.
Yeah, so I thought this is a change that I am not quite a big fan of, because I think Ottomans should be able to establish this colony if they just invest in it. But people struggled to get the sub-Saharan colony going for the Ottomans, so I thought I'd add it for now so people learn, play the area.
Got it, right. Because it heavily incentivizes this army to go here, right? Instead of going, like, this way.
Yeah, people were already going to Timbuktu or Agadez, but they weren't investing further, and then they got disappointed when they lost it.
Right. Gotcha.
Yeah, I don't know. I wanted to make it a bit more of a natural area for the Ottomans to try to expand in.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it's very interesting to try to bring in Ottomans into this colonial hellhole, and see if they can try to break the colonials apart and dominate the sub-Saharan.
Yeah, I mean, it makes for a 6-person Thunderdome instead of a 5-person
Exactly.
one, which is great.
Exactly.
Maybe even
And if
7-person
Spain wants
Thunderdome.
to...
Yeah.
Exactly.
I noticed there weren't many other changes. In fact, there's no other changes in this area, right? Apart from, perhaps my favourite change of all, because you make these borders a little more, like, natural, I suppose. You've also appeared to have recreated Bornu. Their borders are back.
Yeah, Bornu's back.
Obviously, I'm still sad that Bornu no longer exists, but at least there is a tribute to them on the map. That I'm very happy about.
For the world chaos that will absolutely never happen. I can put the dot there for you.
You know, I may well take you up on that. Alright, so, what else was there that you were looking at between B1 2 and B1 3?
So, Congo sucked. Right?
Yep.
Congo got brutally crushed in every game, and that's not something I want in my games. So, we bought Congo. South Home is now not Dutch, and it's actually unreachable year 1. I'll come back to that soon. But I also just made it so that them getting into Mandara is a bit more natural, since they can now put a supported unit into it.
Yep, with the going into Banda and then supporting themselves in. Got it.
This was also done to further put Congo closer to Abyssinia, as it's now the distance to go to Abyssinia is now less long. I can't speak English.
Yes, shorter. With the I
Thank you.
assume these two units will generally go for Azande and Darfur, right? Which means that then
Yep.
the Congo units are here and here. That does provide an interesting first position.
Yeah. Who takes Logone?
Yes, and then of course Ajuran will probably be out here as well, so there'll be a
Yeah.
decent triangle here, as you've been
Yep.
talking about.
Woo.
All right. So, were there any
Uh,
other change? I mean, you said you wanted to talk about Sao Tome as
yeah.
well.
Oh, yeah. So Sao Tome is actually unreachable first year now. No one has a fleet that can go there the first year. So I hope that it should introduce some interesting dynamics of who builds a fleet the second year and goes for Sao Tome.
Yeah, I mean, as Congo, I'd be very, very tempted to, but as the Dutch, I also
Yeah,
want to go, no, that's mine. Get away from me.
exactly. Yeah, like you could, as the Dutch, take one of your units close to Sao, into Sao and then Gold Coast the first year, to get a very natural claim on it and spring the second year. But I don't know. Potential.
Yep. Oh, I see. Sours in. Yeah, okay. I was thinking Sao Tome.
Oh
But
yeah.
yes, sours in
Sorry.
South Atlantic Ocean you could bring through here.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's. Again, it depends how much you want to contest this area, which is obviously very
Yeah.
important as well, right? So,
Yeah.
lots of interesting decisions for that Dutch fleet.
Mm. Yeah, there's a lot of options,
Yeah.
which is fun.
Okay.
Or something. Yep. Other than that, I don't think Africa's changed for this last patch.
Yeah, this is exactly the same down here. Okay, so I think that about covers Africa then. Shall we move along?
Oh, whoa, it's Americas.
Yes, okay, so
Only America left.
we're going back in time again, back to Alpha 1, and over
Oh,
to
wow.
North America with this power that of course I
Dude.
never met in my first iteration because I was a landlocked power on another continent and they're a landlocked power on this continent, so you never will
Yeah.
meet them. Although I did get into I think a shouting match with them in global of just tossing insults at each other about us being the each of us being the important landlocked power. But yeah, this is
That's
the Sioux,
hilarious.
right?
Yes.
And
So, North America has 3 regionals: Inuits, Atapascan, Sioux, and A1.
yes. And these ones, in the same way that we see Bornu disappear, are not going to be here for very long, right?
Yeah. Yeah, Sioux is in the middle of the land and doesn't doesn't really have a natural place to go to get their first fleets. Like, where do they go? Costa Nowhere?
Yeah, and also, the important thing, of course, about trying to get to a coast to get those first fleets is you also have to be able to core it, which takes a whole year and no one can
Yeah,
tap you. It's really hard to do.
yeah. And Apapaska will be right next to you in Chilcotin. So,
Yeah, with their pre-core. And of
yeah.
course, the other
And
option down here is equally the Spanish are not going to like you coring this.
yeah, right between their 2 centers
Yep. Uh,
in Gulf of Mexico. Yeah, that's not gonna work out.
yeah.
So what can I say about North America A1? Um, so I don't know. I don't think it was very well designed. Because where is my triangles?
We need more triangles.
Yeah, like look for triangles here. I can't find any.
Yeah, it is kind of tough because Inuit. So Inuit are a really interesting power in general because they don't feel like they work in the same way as most of the other regionals, right? They're
Exactly.
very. They have a lot of access to oceans, and stuff, and generally in games where I've seen them be successful, because of course they won that first game that I played, they
Yep.
tend to go hard out and use that control of like the oceans to extend out into other areas very, very quickly.
Yep.
Which isn't how you would expect a regional to work, because you expect a regional to consolidate first and try and eliminate
Yeah.
other powers in their own region.
Yep.
Yeah,
And of course, Inuit is also split in two.
yes. So these centers over here, and then of course you pick on the edge, right?
Yep.
And of course,
So that's interesting.
we mentioned in the modern version they also have these centers over here, so they're even more split into.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Yeah, there's 7 center power now, which is
Wow.
interesting.
All right. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So
How did we end up here?
you mentioned not enough triangles here, right?
Yep.
So
The dynamics are in general very linear.
yeah.
Which is in general something you should strive to not have. The only like power triangle that I really think does exist is England, France, and Inuits, and that one is weird.
Yes. Because you've got the England can come in via this direction, but they kind of have to go through France to attack Inuit from here.
Yeah. So the main thing is that both Inuits and England care so much about like these northern seas around Newfoundland and Greenland too, with England's high contest of North Atlantic Ocean. So it kind of interacted like a triangle, even though it geographically doesn't look like one.
Okay. Interesting.
Which is fun.
Yeah.
It was weird.
All right. And yeah, I think that's a triangle that I've definitely seen in the A2 map as well. Like these powers contesting each other and interacting with each other. So generally speaking, in North America, what did you see that you needed to be to fix from A1 to A2?
So I really didn't like Sioux. I thought they were just in the middle and they didn't have a lot of potential. I wanted to spice up the North Pacific Ocean. Because right now, the west coast of America was just very bland.
Yeah.
There's a lot of big sea tiles, but no one's there.
I mean, Athabasca can get there, right? But yeah, there's not...
Yeah.
It takes a while for anyone to get there, and there doesn't seem to be a huge amount of reason to go.
Yeah, like, why should you go there?
Mm-hmm.
So my main goal here was to make this coast more interactive. And this I wanted to do by moving Sioux to the west and placing them in the California area and making a new power called the Ute Shoshone.
Yep.
Or Ute Shoshone.
See,
I think it is.
I have had so many people correct my pronunciation of that in the comments, but no one's actually told me what the pronunciation is. They just tell me that I'm pronouncing it wrong.
Because apparently it's not Ute, it's Ute.
Okay, so that's the part I'm getting wrong. Because I know I've played a lot of Civ 5, right? And Shoshone are a power in that, so I know how to pronounce Shoshone part, but I did not know.
So it's Ute Shoshone.
Okay.
Which is interesting.
Alright.
So, this power, I decided to split it with the Sierra Nevada. So they had this dynamic where they had their naval half and their land half, which made for a quite unique experience, I hope. While I modified the Inuits to have 2 dots in Alaska instead.
Yes.
Moving one of their dots over from the east. Which made this triangle of regionals. Over in like the Gulf of Alaska. And I think it has worked out quite well, even though the geography is kind of wacky. All alliances have played out quite well. Either Inuit and Ute collapse on Athabasca. We've seen Ute and Athabasca like just becoming US and Canada. And also Inuit Athabasca alliances, where Inuit is more of a seafaring power.
Yeah. I know in Ezio's game, I think it was, he allied with these both and just pushed out
Yeah,
into
right.
the ocean. Right? Whereas, of
Yeah,
course,
exactly.
in my game, Athabasca just destroyed everyone. It was
Yeah,
interesting to see just how
exactly.
different it was.
Yeah, but Pasca is one of these powers that can really get rolling, because they're as soon as they get like 12 or more centers, they can just go brutally stab everyone, uh, as long as they get some tempo. And it's a very unique power in that fashion because it's so isolated in the north and quite defensible, and can just really output a lot of pressure.
Yeah, they didn't actually change between Alpha
Yeah,
1 and Alpha 2,
the
though.
exact same.
Yeah, they changed the border just a little bit here, I assume, to
Oh, yeah.
keep them from
Yeah,
being able
and
to put
there's actually
everything.
one big change. If you go back, look at the coast.
Oh, yeah, okay, they get connected to Hudson Bay. That is pretty huge. They can put down fleets here and just be in Inuit's backline immediately, right?
Exactly. Yep.
Nice.
So that's a pretty huge change. Um,
Yeah.
but other than that, I really okay, this is of course the area you played Spain in,
Yes.
and I think Spain, because Spain was super weak in A1, and I think they were made into a quite respectable power in this version.
Yeah, I mean, I did very well in this area until Athabasca started hitting me, of course. um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I absolutely felt like they were quite well, very playable, and honestly kind of strong, at least as far as I saw it. Although I from the results I've seen, it seems like Spain isn't quite as strong as I think the two videos the two video series that we did would have people believe, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because in both of your games, I don't know if you performed very well. Uh, uh,
Yes.
let's not spoil it for everyone if they haven't watched it yet. But yeah, you two were pretty much the only two very well performing Spains. So,
Mhm.
and you both are very talented players. So yeah.
Well, thank you. Our current Russia game is maybe not proving that point, but hey.
But Russia is very difficult,
uh,
and the state you're playing it in. So
I
I don't know.
Alright, so I guess here we're talking now about Alpha 2 and the move on to Alpha. Was there anything in this area that changed between Alpha 1 even and Alpha
I
2?
think it was very similar.
Oh, it is basically exactly the same. You connect up Fort Detroit and Erie, right? And that. Oh,
Yeah,
wait, they
and
were already connected.
Montreal and Seneca. Um, just to add some variance, because since Fort Detroit can now travel to like the central parts of America and contest this big cluster of neutral supply centers.
Gotcha.
They wanted Montreal to have the option of going to Seneca instead.
That makes sense. Alright, well, I think that's then about it from Alpha 1 to. Oh, no, there's one more massive change that happens
Oh
over here,
yeah.
right? Because this is
So
the
go on.
classic variant designer trap, right? Of
Mm,
having two centers inside two centers. I mean,
mm,
the very classic variant designer trap is having one center inside one province, and then you can't
yeah.
get anywhere, right? That one center is completely impenetrable. This is
Yep.
the slightly more difficult to spot version that also becomes impenetrable if England moves here and then builds another fleet.
Yep. You just can't break it, which is hilarious.
Yeah. Um, my instinct, like, looking at this would have just been to add a land bridge here, right? But you actually
Yeah,
fix
and
it in a more interesting way, I think.
I've actually looked at that land bridge lately, so
Oh,
it
interesting.
might make its way. It might make its way into the next patch. I was actually considering it for this patch, but it didn't happen
Yes.
because I forgot.
See, I also wonder with the land bridges whether there needs to be more historical context than the way I think about it is just, oh, these look close enough together, I'll add a land bridge there, right?
Yeah,
But in
yeah,
reality, I don't know whether that's justified as a land bridge. I don't know.
yeah. I don't know how far the distance is there.
All right, but
Don't you?
yes, you fix it by adding White Bay, right?
Yep.
So this is
Should
still
help.
super defensible, but it's not impenetrable, and that's a huge difference.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. Okay, so I think we're approaching stage where we're ready to move on. We haven't looked at Caribbean, but the Caribbean has basically stayed the same between A1 and A2.
Yeah.
I just shuffled around. Bay of Mexico was renamed into Gulf of Mexico, but I think that was it.
Yeah.
Uh,
I guess this isn't quite the Caribbean, but we've got
yeah, true.
Mexico City and Guadalajara were.
Guadalajara.
You are much better at this than me. Were merged into one where you get to attack it from both sides or produce fleets from both sides, right? Yeah, I don't know if
While
there was.
adding Nueva Vizcaya instead in the north.
Gotcha. Was there a specific reason for this?
Previously Spain was just too far south, so they struggled actually like getting out of Mexico and into North America proper. So I just wanted to move one of their centers further north to make sure they were actually in the contention for neutral centers.
Got it. Okay. Actually, there was one more thing I want to talk about, which is it's more South America, but I'll get to it now instead. The Suez Canal obviously exists in this variant, despite not being around at this time, just to make it a bit more playable and give Ottomans more options with their fleets, right? So they're not completely locked in if they build here. I noticed you never did the same with the Panama Canal. I think it stays as the North Coast, South Coast throughout, right?
Correct.
So, is there a reason for that?
Yes, absolutely. And I'd just like to quickly comment on Cairo, because originally when I was designing the map, it had coasts. Because I thought, okay, the Suez Canal does not exist yet. But I found some interesting, like smaller historical canals, in the area, which I used to justify the canal in Cairo.
Ah, right.
But they they weren't that effective, to say the least. But anyways, back to
Gotcha.
Panama. So I was worried. I was always worried that this huge, like 8-center Spain holding would be too powerful, especially if I did allow them to organize their fleets however they'd like. Just the fact that we do split off Spain's fleets into their western and eastern fleets make them a bit less flexible. If they could just like shuffle all their fleets out to the Caribbean very quickly if they wanted to through Panama, that might have been too strong. I don't know. I've multiple times thought about adding the Panama Canal to help another power in South America that we'll talk about later, called Aymara, to like allow Aymara to reach the Caribbean. But I'm not sure on its impact on Spain's balance, so I haven't done it yet.
Got it. Yeah, I think speaking as a Spain player, not on this variant, but on this one, right? This map here. If Panama had a canal, my game would have been much easier. Right? I can put down a fleet here whenever I want to, with the excuse being, oh, it needs to go out this way. Although I guess you still have to justify that to people. Probably more likely you'll put down fleets here, and then if you ever want to go to the Caribbean, you can just force through so many of them. Whereas with my actual game, it was more like every unit I want to invest in the Caribbean, I need to think through the consequences of building, right? I need to go, do I want to lock that unit? Because it's not going to be able to go anywhere else for a while, right?
You need to break open the entire Caribbean to transfer that unit somewhere else.
Yes, exactly. It made for a super interesting decision, and I think it actually led in part to what I do in the game, which is I don't actually control the Caribbean for most of my game, right? I'm not going to talk too much about what I actually do, but I focus a lot more on this side with my fleets, which... Yeah, if the Panama Canal had existed, I wouldn't have had to make that decision. It would have been a lot easier for me.
Yeah, exactly. I think it just adds a bit more interesting decision making.
Yeah, alright.
So, as long as it doesn't like make Spain way too weak, I don't think the Panama Canal will exist in future iterations.
Gotcha. Right, so, so we're now on Alpha 2. Were there any major things you wanted to change going into Beta 1.2?
So generally, I'm quite happy with North America. I've been considering if I could modify the English-French dynamics a bit, but I don't do so for the next patch. I think we can go to that one because I think there's minimal changes.
Yeah, it is just the names here and here, right?
Yeah.
Which I guess,
exactly.
again, would just be suggestions from your Discord, or...
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because in general here, I was pretty happy with the balance of North America, and I was already in a bit of crunch for time for modifying the map. So I focused on fixing the Austria changes in Europe and doing West Africa and some of the changes over in India over modifying North America because I think it's fine as is.
Got it. And there's nothing down here as well, right?
Nope.
Sorry,
whoops.
I selected the wrong button there. That was...
Whoopsie!
Alright, well, we got Antigua here instead of Barbuda as well. But yeah, so, we have... Then we go on from Beta 1.2 into Beta 1.3, which I assume will have a few more changes.
Not that
no, nothing in North America. Apart from
so far
removing the thick border here.
Yeah. So far, I've chosen to not modify North America. Because as I said, I'm pretty happy with it actually. I will probably change some stuff down the line, but I just want more data for now. And I think in general, the area should mostly just need some minor fixes. For example, youth might need some small buffs to make Athapasca bits easier to control. But in general, I am quite happy.
Nice. But there was a major change down here that I accidentally revealed a little too early.
So the center in South Home was of course removed in Africa. And I wanted to put it somewhere else. And one of the stronger powers on the map is England. And that is because they have a very easy time consolidating the Caribbean. And the Caribbean is very valuable. So I wanted to complicate the relations of consolidating the Caribbean. Because now, if you want to consolidate the Caribbean, you need to antagonize France, Spain, and the Netherlands. Which should slow down England a bit, as that would leave Portugal as your only remaining colonial ally.
That's
Uh,
that's super interesting because my first thought looking at these fleets was that England has a lot more fleets than anyone else in this area, right?
that is correct.
But you have to
That
think
is
about the
correct.
diplomatic penalty of just using those.
Exactly. Because if you just pack everyone, they won't be happy. They'll they'll organize worldwide coalitions against you. So I don't know how this change will play out yet, but the hope is that this Dutch colony should be pretty interesting and should make the whole French, British, Netherlands triangle a bit more interesting. Because, as said, we have these triangles, and they can be worldwide if we want to.
Yeah.
And who knows? Maybe a really talented Dutch player can manage to, with the help of, for example, Parmaba, establish a strong Caribbean presence, which I think is just fun potential.
Yeah, I agree. Will be very interesting to see. I'm looking forward to it. All right.
Yeah. We'll have to see how this change actually plays out, but hopefully it should be crazy.
Yes. All right. So, yeah. Was there anything else regarding North America you want to go over?
So of course, for this last patch, we added Inuits over in Asia.
Yes.
So we'll have to see how that impacts Inuit's performance, and that in itself might inspire changes in North America for the next patch. But we'll have to see how all of that plays out. It's also worth to notice that Greenland was heavily modified for this
Yes.
version.
There's a lot more
Uh,
possible now.
yes, you can now convoy armies into this title called Tunumisut, yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
And Godfob and Bratalid are adjacent now for armies. So I could see like stuff like Russia convoying into to Tsunomisu and doing fun plays around that area.
Yeah. I can absolutely see that. That'll be an interesting one. I wonder whether it's going to be similar to Australia and that it's something we see very, very rarely, despite it being quite
Mm.
a good idea, just because it's a long range commitment, right? If you're
Yeah,
doing
for
this
sure.
as Russia, you kind of need a stable front elsewhere to be able to justify that. But if it does
Yeah.
happen, it will be pretty awesome. I know as Russia, I've ended up with armies in Spitsbergen before, so
Yeah.
getting them here is not too difficult.
Exactly.
Mhm.
I also want to see like just this being a potential future path for stuff like Sweden to get into Greenland, because they of course are a bit slower, but I think they could unlock like Greenland Sea pretty early on, if they play aggressive northwards, and it could allow some interesting moves up there.
Yeah, it'll be
But we'll have
interesting.
to see. Yep.
All right. Oh, you mentioned Sweden here. I think it was in North America. I can't remember exactly, but I remember a big discussion that you had like quite early on in ImpDip's development process about how Sweden had a colony somewhere, and you were debating
Oh
putting
yeah,
that
yeah,
in.
yeah.
Was that here somewhere?
Yes. So what is now Maryland? This like weird peninsula sticking out.
Hmm.
That was a Swedish colony during the time of MTEP. And I have multiple times considered adding a colony there. I don't think it will happen, sadly, because it's already a chaotic region. And the tiles would be so small, so I don't know if it would work out, but it would be really cool to see Swedish colonies.
I guess also if you increase Sweden's like starting power by one, their
Yeah.
win condition goes up a lot, and that doesn't seem to justify it.
Yeah, exactly. If it's not a very, very holdable colony, it's not worth it. Poland works because both their colonies are pretty strong. So even though they're very, very disconnected from the rest of their empire, it actually works, and it proves to like add a lot to how Poland interacts with the entirety of the board, because they have to care about all the colonials all of a sudden.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that, I think we will go back in time again, back to Alpha 1 one last time.
Back to the last continent.
And that is South America, which in the very first iteration of ImpDip,
Oh my god.
Yeah, it's so different to what we're used to, even in Alpha 2, right?
Yeah, it's so empty.
Yeah,
so
I remember thinking when I was playing this first one, even though I was in Bornu, right? When I was looking at this, I was like, this is kind of a throwaway region. And not exactly a throwaway region. Obviously, there's a power here who is regional to this, and there's a few colonials who contest it. But there's so few SCs here, I feel like everyone's incentivized to just look outwards, right?
Yeah. So the interesting part here is that in reality, Spain had even more land than this.
Wow.
They also controlled these two tiles up in the north, Cartagena and Caracas, as well as some stuff in the south, including Cordoba, Buenos Aires, and Ascension, and Valdivia.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I had already cut down a lot on Spanish holdings here.
Yes, because if you give the Spanish that, even if you just remove supply centers from it, right? There's just no way you can put more supply centers in this region without Spain just collapsing in on everyone.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, South America is by far the most troublesome area on this map. As there's not a lot of powers here in A1, and it's just in general been considered to be the most boring region because of it. The dynamics are very simple. There's not a lot of options. Mapuche, the power in the south, has, due to their session, is just not very interesting because they only have one direction to go, and that's north. If they want to stay on the continent, and other than that, it's just colonials.
Yeah.
And even if Mapuche goes into the sea, let's say they go into South Pacific Ocean and go to Australia, guess who they meet? They meet Portugal and Spain
just find the
and
same
Dutch.
colonials again. Yeah.
Or you go maybe to Africa. You mean Dutch and Portugal.
Yep, I can see the problem there.
So Mapuche had like 3 powers in total that they had to care about, which is just not very interesting.
So that's the main problem you were trying to tackle here, right?
Yep. So already like during the middle of A1, I considered, okay, how do I actually fix this? I need a lot to make this region fun. So my first attempt at this was introducing a new power, Aymara.
Yep, there we go. There's Aymara.
So we cut back Spain a lot here. They're now only like this Peru area. So Aymara, they were absolutely an improvement to South America, but it still just wasn't that interesting, I think. What's your experience of South America?
So I felt, especially with this initial setup, that I was just very incentivized to go for Aymara off the bat. Just the starting positions of things, right? Quito being able to, at worst, bounce Exura out of Peru Basin, and at best, it gets into Peru Basin, and I get into Quechua, right? And just have that attack on their home centers. Spain is
just
quite
by
heavily
opening towards
incentivized.
neutrals.
Yeah, I did like this area. It felt like a very
Yeah,
natural triangle, like you were talking about, right?
yeah. Yep, that is one of the areas that I really liked about this continent, and I think it should be kept throughout its entire lifespan.
Nice. All right, but yes, I felt like I was a bit too incentivized to go this way, and I know Ezio's opinion was that this power was complete trash. In his words,
Yeah,
he tends to be a bit
I agree.
stronger in his opinions, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's fine. I kind of agree. Aymara, I don't know. They need the entire continent to win.
Mhm.
Like, their victory condition is 32, and guess how many centers there are in South America? 32. Uh, which means, and like, yes, you could technically go into the sea and get more dots there, but they're not very connected to the sea.
Yeah, they don't have the same kind of options that Mapuche do, right?
Yeah,
This is it's just all a bit more problematic, especially considering that Spain has more control over this area than they do.
yeah. They kind of have to eliminate both Spain and Mapuche to get a proper grip on the ocean.
Yeah, which is very, very tough. Especially considering
Yeah,
it also feels like South America is still quite SC-like. As you mentioned, 32 dots
yeah,
for the whole thing, which is that they have to take the whole thing for their win condition. But that also
yeah,
means just the amount of builds they're getting is never going to be very much early on, right?
yeah. It's very scarce. Everything is so far away. It's not very dynamic so far.
Mm-hmm.
So while I did think that it was an improvement, uh, I at this point started considering, okay, so what are the options here? How do we actually make South America fun? And I think we had three main options at this point. The first one was trying to make everyone a bit closer in the northern half of South America by making the Amazons a high sea tile, or not high sea tile, but a high jungle tile, similar to what I wanted to do with the Sahara, to make it so that Aymara really quickly could get over to Dutch Brazil or up to the northern parts like Pamerbo and Caracas. Um, so that was the first option. The second option was adding third regional to South America. This would increase the total center count in South America, while also just like adding diplomatical uh, challenges, as there's now more parts to this puzzle. The third one, um, it's worth to notice that this was before I did the changes to West Africa, but for a while I considered removing all regionals in South America, moving Spain to closer to their Argentinian holdings, so that the English dot in Belize could be an army and take areas like Panama.
Ooh.
Uh, yeah, so that I had that idea brewing for a while, and for a while that was my actual plan for South America. Um, but I did not actually execute it because I wasn't sure, and then I realized, oh wait, I kind of need to put this only colonial area in West Africa. I don't want too many of them
Yeah.
because I think that makes the colonials too powerful.
I mean, I agree. You would have to keep the area very SC light in order for it not to be a massive problem, right? And
Exactly.
if it's very SC light, that also doesn't incentivize them to fight very much.
Yeah. So it, I didn't think of any solution as perfect because I didn't think there was a good location for another regional lever. Um, it was hard finding a spot along the coast while also finding like a tribal culture that were relevant enough to like actually be big and be turned into a power.
Yeah.
So Yeah, we so that was my challenges for South America. So for the next map,
So,
if we go forth,
yep.
I don't do a lot. I do some minor patches to Aymara to make them in Spain a bit more chill,
Yeah, I
I
think
suppose.
connecting this army up to Quechua is pretty huge because it means that Spain
Mm.
isn't incentivized to just walk into there, right? They
Yeah,
can at
exactly.
least bounce it out. And of
Yeah,
course, you've disconnected the fleet from Peru Basin, which is pretty huge as
yeah.
well.
The idea behind bringing South Pacific Ocean into Trujillo was to make it so that Mapuche could actually go into Spain far easier.
Ooh, yeah, because it's only well,
Yeah,
three spaces away.
yeah, but imagine a convoy into Trujillo or
That
something.
is a very interesting concept. Yeah, I feel like the bigger
Yeah,
threat
but also
is Colon Ridge,
Colin Ridge.
even. But
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, Colin Ridge is huge.
Mhm.
So this was mainly a like minor fix just for the moment. As said, I was busy trying to fix Europe and Africa at the time. So,
Yes.
but I wanted to make South America okay, more okay.
Were there any other changes? I assume not down here, right?
Uh, there was a Aymara got another sea tile that got went into SPO. Uh, Intended to make it so that they could funnel fleets out faster
Got
in
it.
case they wanted to go into Australia or something. But yeah,
Yeah, and I
I
think
think that was it.
the only other change I saw was the name change on St. Louis, right? Which
Yeah,
I
and
guess
of course
is
there is a pretty huge change to the Dutch here since they can now go with Maritstad to South America, South
South
Africa.
Africa, yeah. But it's not directly related to South America itself, right? It's the
Exactly.
change elsewhere. Um,
Yeah.
Alright, so we are still in roughly the same position with a few Aymara buffs here. I'm curious if the games in this round did see Aymara have better results. I haven't actually seen.
Uh, so the games have only gone on for about a month, a bit more. So they haven't gotten super far. Do
Right.
note this Portugal that we talked about earlier won in 5 weeks. So I haven't even had time to start another wave, and they have already soloed.
Aye. Alright, so we're gonna have to wait a bit longer to see how the Aymara changes have panned out then.
Yeah, but in general, I think they help. Um,
Nice.
they perform a bit better. It's not a huge difference.
Alright, so then we're gonna be going into the actual big change that happens, which is from B12 to B13, right?
Yeah, so
Shall I reveal it?
we re yes we rework the continent. Go ahead.
Whoa! Okay, I see a lot more dots and a new power. What is
Yep.
this power?
Welcome the Guarani tribes. So since the first time since August, we're adding a power, which is super exciting. I selected the second option for South America. I wanted to add a third regional. Um, so now we have this regional triangle dynamic in South, um, which I think. So of course nothing has been played on this map yet. So I don't know how any of this will play out yet. But there's a lot of things to talk about here. To begin with, there's just a lot more dots in general in South America. So this means that uh, there all the regionals in South America that was previously pretty weak now will have a lot more dots to play around with before they have to leave the continent to colonize stuff like Africa and Oceania.
Hmm.
Um, and it also opens up like actual stable regional alliances in South America. But because previously Aymara and Mapuche they could be allied for a while, but they they could only gain 50% of their win condition from South America if they want to remain allied.
Yeah.
So
Right.
now each power can get, I believe, 22 of their 32 centers from South America if they split it in two, which is far better than 16.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't expect them to last because it's pretty tense.
Yep.
Oh, by the way, find the whales.
The whales? What?
The wheels.
Oh, right. The big wheel that you were talking about. Is it just all the way around here?
Yep.
Oh my god. Okay. Yeah.
There's a second one.
Um.
There's a second one around Ofai and Kangag.
Where is that? Sorry, I am.
Just north of it.
Oh.
But
Oh, I see. Around here.
Yeah. But they're
God.
two interconnected wheels.
So Iorio or whatever this is gonna have to choose which wheel to participate in.
Exactly.
God. Alright, for people who haven't seen the biggest game of all time video, which I assume might not be the case, I might need to rename that series to the after this.
Oh.
But yeah. It's still an awesome series, but there was so much stupid stuff that went on in it, and one of them was the Wheel Alliance, which was an alliance based around everyone moving in a circle through supply centers that never successfully happened, but there was a huge alliance based around it, right?
Yeah, it was great.
And so here
So anyways,
sorry, go on.
Oh yeah, no, so it's funny. I noticed that when I finalized my sketch of the area, like, oh no, I have two enormous wheels right here. What do I do? But oh well, here we are.
I'm curious then, do you generally look at SC chains when you're designing a place?
Very much so.
Yeah.
It's supply center chains. As I said, the chain guides all. The direction where the chain heads is where powers are most likely to expand. And in general, South America has been very chainless, and now it ain't anymore.
Yeah.
So there is a chain in the middle here, including Portugal and Aymara.
Yeah, it goes across here, right?
Yeah.
But
that was the only like real chain. But now, like Portugal, Aymara, Guarani, and Mapuche are all connected to the same chain, and they're all chained into each other, which should make for, in general, very chaotic and aggressive gameplay.
I'm super excited to see how it plays out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was there anything else you want to talk? Oh, okay. So there's a massive change a little further south that I'm delaying for the moment. I do want to look up here and see. There were some minor changes that occur over here, right?
So it still remains this like a triple of supply centers. Mostly there's some border redraws, just graphical changes.
Got it.
In the area. So the north is quite similar, but the north is also connected to the supply center chain now. So from Madeira you can go to Chiquitano and Nocogo, and even further south, which should impact Aymara a lot, since they're both the center at the top, Madeira, and their other natural neutrals are connected, which should make them more easily defended.
Yep. Okay, nice. And I see that Spain has kind of reset to the position it was at in A2. Well, not quite, I guess.
Kind of. Because now Aymara can head for Galapagos without attacking Spain. And Aymara now has access to NPO.
Oh, yes. Okay. That's a super interesting one. I assume you wouldn't want to, as Aymara, you probably won't want to go for that super early, but it definitely opens up a lot of later game strategies for them.
One of the goals here was to make so that all the South American regionals had their own unique path out of South America. Guarani can head into South Atlantic Ocean. Mapuche can go into South Pacific Ocean. Aymara can go into North Pacific Ocean, and so on. So I just wanted to find like unique ways where they could find themselves outside of South America.
Mm-hmm. Nice. All right. So the other thing that I've been keeping us too far north to see is this connection right here, which means
we connected
that every South Pacific Ocean slot is adjacent to every South Atlantic Ocean slot, right?
Yep.
So what was the thinking behind this one?
So in general, Mapuche, I've always wanted them to interact more with the Atlantic, and like I tried. So actually, there's between Wave 2 and Wave 3, there was different iteration of South America. It's not saved here because it was never official, kinda, or it's in the patch notes channels, but it was never played. Basically.
Got it. Yeah.
Where there was still only 2 South American regionals, and I did do the Amazon thingy.
Right.
The high Amazons.
I'll find the screenshot and put it in the video here.
Yeah, sounds awesome. And I also connected Islas Malvinas to SAO in that version. But it kinda made Mapuche too easy to keep out those centers in the early game, and a bit too easy to attack. So I wanted to make Mapuche's strength in South Pacific Ocean into a strength in South Atlantic Ocean, in the way that they could now easily transfer fleets between the 2 high seas. This should also be very interesting for the colonials, such as Portugal, Spain, and Netherlands, as they can now transfer units between the Pacific and the Atlantic so much easier.
Yep. I do notice that you've taken down the South Pacific Ocean to 3 slots, which I think we noted briefly when we were talking about Australia. Is that just to stop people, like everyone, using this at the same time?
Yep. I was afraid of it just making Mapuche too easy to attack, so I reduced the spots in South Pacific to make it a bit easier for Mapuche to actually control South Pacific. And since there's actually only 2 dots next to South Pacific Ocean now, Gunai over in Australia and the Chiloé, I didn't think it needed that many spots.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Oh yeah, it's called Wuruk nowadays. I forgot. Not Gunai.
Yes, I also didn't know that. You're torturing people who are playing Blitz here, right? Trying to type this in.
So the thing is, we have a lot of very lot of historians in our server, of course, that give feedback on when certain names are ahistorical, or just a bit inaccurate, and then I go in and change stuff.
Yes, indeed. Alright, but yeah, that's awesome. So then this becomes like Mapuche's version of Japan's North Pacific Ocean.
Exactly.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Like, it's starting to take shape. I don't know how this will play out, but I feel like people have been actually super excited about South America since I announced it yesterday, the idea of Guarani. So hopefully this should make South America an actually interesting region of the map.
Well, I'm sure you're going to get a lot of Guarani signups in this wave.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Oh, nice. All right, yeah, I'm very excited to see how it plays out as well, and I'm sure this area will need more changing in future. Right, that's always going to be the case when you make a massive
Yeah.
change like this.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's
Yeah, I
super,
I think the only time where I've made huge changes and don't have to go back and fix it was with North America when I added youth and all that.
yes.
That has worked, but otherwise I always have to give it a second round.
Yep, it's
So
all about
in general,
that
when you
iteration.
create, yeah, exactly. In general, when you create your variants, don't be afraid of making mistakes, because you can always run a playtest, and if you're still invested in the variant, you can go in, make some changes, and improve.
Aye. And on that, I did want to note, if you're still watching at this point, so 3 hours 15 into the video,
Yep.
you are probably quite interested in variants, in which case you may be interested in our variant design contest, which Ezio is running over on our Discord server. Anyone who... We're generally looking for variants that haven't yet been playtested, so I'm sorry, Flare, you can't submit Imperial Diplomacy. It will probably win.
So sad.
So if you have
Don't you worry, I'll submit something else.
If you have an idea for a variant that you haven't put to paper yet, even if you haven't created any variant at all yet, you're welcome to go over to our server, discuss it with people. That's generally a great thing about variant design. It's very collaborative. As Flare mentioned, he's been talking to people on his Discord server while doing all of this, and you can do that equally in the Diplostrats one. And you can make a submission, and we will look through all of them in a video we're making at the end. I think the deadline... I don't want to get it wrong here. I think it's in early May.
Like 4th May or something?
That sounds about right, yes.
Somewhere around there.
Alright.
On that note, too, if you guys catch me on Discord, I'd be up to give feedback to your guys' maps too.
Fantastic.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Variant design is so much fun.
Diplomacy variant design has a very long and storied history. If you look back through all of the diplomacy zines that happened over like the 60s and 70s and so on, variant design was a massive thing that came up over and over and over and over again, right? And we're very happy to see that continuing with things like Imperial Diplomacy and hundreds of others right out there. And we'd love to facilitate that. So we're running this variant design contest. You can submit to it. It doesn't matter whether it's done in a weekend or whether you spend the entire couple of months on it. Feel free to just give it a go and throw your creativity out there into the world.
Yeah, like designing a variant, it doesn't have to take that long. I threw together the entire first draft of Imperial Diplomacy in a week.
Wow, I did not know that.
Yep. I was homesick for a week and was super bored, so this is why Imperial Diplomacy exists.
Oh, fantastic. Alright, but yeah, so if you're 3 hours into this video and you're interested in variants, I would highly recommend checking that out. Go along and give creating a variant a go. It's quite a fun thing to do, right? Awesome. So that brings us to where we currently are at with Imperial Diplomacy. A long way away from where we started, right?
Yeah, I think just flick back to A1.
Yep.
See how much the difference, just the silhouette of the map, it's completely different.
And it's been again, it's just been fantastic to play. I've only played on the first 2 of these maps. I'm really looking forward to playing on the new one as well. So yes, if you're at all interested in playing Imperial Diplomacy, please go ahead and check out the Imperial Diplomacy server. It's linked in the video description. Flare, was there anything you wanted to say to finish up with here?
We launched signups on Saturday, so woo!
Fantastic.
In case the video launches before then,
I will try my best to get it out.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining me on this. It's been fantastic to have you and to talk through all of this. And just
It's been really interesting for me as well, just getting an oversight of what has actually changed on this map.
because it's been
It's
over the
very cool.
course of a year for you, right? Like
Yeah,
slow
exactly.
changes, just seeing it all at
It's
once.
been it's been quite a year.
That's something. Yes, so thank you very much for joining me. This has been the evolution of Imperial Diplomacy. If you want to see more videos like this about variants, let me know in the comments. I'd be very interested to hear that. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Bye bye.